In the opening scene, a girl, Amajiri Haruka, faces a tough opponent in a fighting ring. Both warriors land speed attacks on themselves using their magical abilities to their advantage. At some point, Haruka goes in for the kill strike, but she fails to hit her target and pays a huge price for it as her opponent gets a clean slice of her body. As life slips away from Haruka, she mutters, "I'm sorry, Ayato." During the previous century, an unprecedented disaster known as Invertia, the rain of falling stars, drastically changed the world. Back then, the powers of existing nations declined significantly, paving the way for a conglomerate of entities called Integrated Enterprise Foundations to seize leadership. The people gradually began to alter their sense of morality, but at the same time, Invertia also brought new potential to the world. It brought about the birth of a new breed of human exhibiting phenomenal physical skills, the Genistella. Asterisk is an island that houses academies and hosts battle sports called festas between the Genistella. In the present, a transfer student, Amagiri Ayato, enters into a lady's bedroom to return her handkerchief he picked from the ground. The lady in question is none other than Princess Julis Alexia von Riesfeld. Julis freaks out when she sees Ayato because she is dressing up for school. She allows Ayato to remain in the room under the condition that he looks away while she dresses up. However, when she is done, Ayato hands her the handkerchief, and she seems glad. She then bows and appreciates Ayato for giving her the handkerchief since it is dear to her. Surprisingly, she changes her mood and attempts to use her magical powers to blast Ayato out of her room. The good thing is that Ayato jumps out of the window seconds before he can take any damage, but the bad thing is that Julis is still onto him. Soon, students gather around their position to witness a battle between them. Julis's anger stems from the fact that Ayato infiltrated the female's dormitory building. In Ayato's defense, he is just a transfer student, and he has no idea of how things work in Asterisk. On the other hand, Julis formally introduces herself as the rank 5 of the Seidukan Academy, and then challenges Julis to a duel. Since Ayato has no weapon, a student from the crowd throws one for him. He then accepts Julis's challenge and pulls out his weapon to prepare for battle. The duel begins as Julis launches flaming attacks on Ayato, but she misses her target because her opponent, Ayato, moves quickly. Ayato plays the defense as he takes on several strikes from Julis. It gets to a point where Julis summons a deadly fireball at Ayato in hopes of finishing him off. However, Ayato charges past the flames and saves Julis from an imminent arrow. Julis expresses shock when she realizes that the arrow shot earlier was aiming for her. Soon, the president of the Seidukan Academy's student council, Claudia Enfield, arrives at the scene and voids Ayato's duel. When asked why, she tells Julis that Ayato has yet to complete his transfer formalities, and as such, he is not a Seidukan Academy student. Later that morning, Claudia leads the way into the Seidukan Academy's building. While at it, Ayato converses with her and finds out that she has been the president since her first year. Currently, she is in year 3 and in the same grade as Ayato. When she speaks out on the matter, she tells Ayato to address her like a normal student. He still follows her to the council office. Here, Claudia formally welcomes Ayato to Asterisk, and then goes on to give a breakdown of the academies that exist on the island. Some of these are Gerardworth, Alicant, Le Wolf, and some others are the academies on the Asterisk mentioned by Claudia. According to her, the best of the Genistella are handpicked from across the world to attend the 6 academies. Once in a year, they battle for supremacy, and those battles draw worldwide attention. However, Claudia reveals that the Seikukan Academy's record has been rather dismal in recent years. She then requests that Ayato triumph when he represents their academy at the festas. If he does, the academy will fulfill his heart's desire, so long as it can be realized in the world. Ayato, after listening to Claudia's lecture, reveals that he does not really have any desire at the moment. When asked why he came to the academy, a picture of his sister, Haruka, flashes in his head. He then snaps back into reality and questions Claudia if Haruka attended the Seidukan Academy. In turn, Claudia replies by displaying some data on a virtual tablet. The data is about Haruka, who attended the school about 5 years ago but withdrew 6 months later due to personal reasons, according to Claudia. She adds that all other data on Haruka has been erased, and there is no record of her taking part in the festas, nor does it seem she was ever entered into the named cults. On the other hand, Ayato sees a Seidukan Orga Lux, the Servaresta, which is a weapon that Haruka used. However, Claudia reveals that Haruka is likely no longer in the Seidukan Academy. Moving on, Claudia gets curious and questions Ayato about other reasons he came to the academy. Ayato then replies by saying that he came to find purpose. Following that, Claudia reveals that scholarship transfer students have the first choice of the academy's Orga Lux weapons. Since Ayato is one, he reveals his interest in checking out the Servaresta later. In the meantime, Claudia hands Ayato a normal sword for him to use pending the time that he will check out the other weapon. Before Ayato leaves the office, Claudia hugs him from behind. smiling that she finally got to meet him. That afternoon, an instructor introduces Ayato to his class in the academy. Coincidentally, he is to sit beside his nemesis, Julius, for the rest of the semester. After lunch, Ayato tries to smoothen things with Julius to prevent future disasters. While at it, Julius acknowledges that he saved her in the past and she owes him one. After she walks out of the class, a student, Yabuki Eishiru, makes fun of Ayato and introduces himself to him. At sunset, Ayato joins Yabuki on a walk to their hostel. On the way, they both enter a conversation where Yabuki reveals that Julius is a princess from a country called Lysultania. He also says that Julius is one of the rare Genistella, the Stegus. From the way he speaks, Ayato assumes that he knows a lot about Julius. Meanwhile, Yabuki gives the excuse that he is from the newspaper club. Another interesting fact about Julius is the fact that she is in the academy. Reason being that she rose all the way to the Seiduken rank 5 in the blink of an eye. Moving on, Ayato hands Yabuki a weapon and thanks him for giving it to him earlier. Yabuki is quite shocked that Ayato knew it was him who threw the weapon at him before the battle against Julius. However, Ayato gives an excuse that his sister used to nag at him about returning what he borrowed. Just then, a heated conversation between Julius and a student, Lester McPhail, draws Ayato and Yabuki's attention. Lester McPhail wants to duel Julius over the fact that she fought against Ayato earlier. Despite that, Julius does not intend to fight because she has won him several times over. In the meantime, Ayato asks Yabuki to reveal some information about Lester McPhail, and he does accordingly. According to him, Lester McPhail is a page 1 of the rank 9. When asked what a page 1 is, Yabuki replies by saying that it is a ranking system that houses the top 12 in an academy. On the other hand, Lester McPhail insists on fighting dueling Julius because he cannot bear the pain of having no wins against her. He insists to the point where he disrespects Julius and assumes that she is fighting in the school for fun. At this point, Julius gets pissed and displays a fraction of her power to prove a point. Sometime in the past, when Ayato was a lot younger, his father was mad at him for something he did. Back then, his sister told him that their father forbade him from fighting because he possessed tremendous power. If left unchecked, the power could hurt Ayato and others. Despite Haruka's speech, Ayato did not understand the message she passed because he was young. However, Haruko told him that he would understand the moment when he discovered his purpose. Toward the end of that conversation, Haruka promised to protect Ayato, while Ayato promised to protect her too. In the present, Ayato regains consciousness after having a dream about his childhood. He gets out of bed and heads out for a run before the sun comes out. While at it, he recalls what happened the previous day when he was walking back to the male's dormitory building. Back then, Ayato interfered in Lester's face with Julius, but remained calm despite Lester being bigger than him. Lester left the scene after his companions convinced him to cancel his meeting with Julius. In his absence, Ayato gets curious and questions Julius about why she fights in the school. He aims to get clarification because Julius is a princess, and princesses should not have to fight for anything. Surprisingly, Julius reveals that she fights because she needs the money. Soon, Yabuki joins the conversation, and Julius is stuck trying to defend the fact that she does not have a fighting partner in the academy yet. When asked to give some attributes about her preferred partner, Yabuki realizes that it is a bit much to ask for. He then leaves the scene after getting a call from someone. As Julius carries her bag to leave too, Ayato asks her for directions back to the male's dormitory building. Amused, Julius points in the direction of the dormitory, but Ayato insists that she shows her around the academy later on. In the end, Julius agrees to Ayato's wishes and fixes the tour on their next off day. In the present, Ayato rounds up his morning workout session and prepares for class. In class, the entire students express shock when they notice that Julius replies to Ayato's greetings. Sitting on Ayato's right is Saya, Ayato's childhood friend. Ayato expresses shock when he sees her because he was not expecting to end up in the same class as her, let alone school. Sadly, in Ayato's eyes, Saya's body has not changed in the past 6 years. When he voices out on the matter, Saya responds by saying that she grew taller. Soon a teacher enters the class and calls the students to order. She then walks off to Saya's seat and questions her about why she was not in class the previous day. Meanwhile, Saya gives an excuse that she merely overslept. She tries to blame her bed for making her miss class. That afternoon, Julius applies makeup on her face because it is time for her tour with Ayato. When she heads back to class, she tries to make it look as if the only reason she is taking Ayato on a tour is because she owes him one. Saya, who is currently in class, interrupts Julius and reveals that she will show Ayato around the academy. She uses the fact that Julius pretends to be uninterested in the tour to snatch Ayato away. However, Julius blows hot and tells Saya that she has no intention of breaking any promises. Claudia arrives in the classroom and grabs Ayato's hand. It turns out that she was listening to Saya's conversation with Julius all along. When asked what she is doing in the class, she smiles and says that she wants to join in all the fun. She then heads straight to the point and hands Ayato a document concerning his Orga Lux weapon selection test, which will come up the next day. In the meantime, Julius is quite suspicious of Claudia because she took the time to hand-deliver a mere document to Ayato. After Ayato is done signing the documents, he questions Julius and Claudia about their relationship together, and they reply by giving opposing answers. Julius reveals that Claudia is her longtime acquaintance, who she has run into many times at the Vienna Opera House ball. As time passes, Claudia leaves the class, and Ayato heads out on a tour with Saya and Julius. While on the tour, Saya reveals that she has directional challenges. Upon hearing this, Julius wonders why she insisted on giving Ayato the tour earlier. Ayato speeds off to get drinks as he smells that an argument will start between the girls. In his absence, Saya questions Julius about her promise to Ayato. Julius then replies by speaking about the duel she had with Ayato about a day ago. At some point, Saya reveals that she is on the same power level as Julius. Because of that, she feels that she is not qualified enough to take on Ayato since he is more powerful. Julius is not one to back down from a fight, and as such, she asks Saya to test her facts. Just before their duel can start, 3 light arrows are shot at them. Immediately, Julius notices that the arrow is the same as the one from the previous day. He finds the source and fires a magical projection at him. However, the archer's colleague arrives and neutralizes the attack. Meanwhile, Saya deploys an advanced magical grenade launcher and lands a lethal shot on the archers. After she clears out the enemy, she asks Julius if she would like to continue with the duel, but she politely declines. Ayato arrives at their position after some minutes and finds them soaking wet. The following day, Ayato meets up with Claudia in regard to the Orgalux weapon selection test. On their way to the test facility, Ayato speaks about the attack on Julius the previous day. On the other hand, Claudia explains that Asterisk has its police force, but its jurisdiction does not extend to the school grounds. Soon they both arrive at the testing facility, and Lester is there already. Lester aims to check out an Orgalux weapon, and he can only qualify for it if his compatibility reads over 80%. Surprisingly, he is after the Servaresta, which Ayato aims to get. Upon seeing the sword, Ayato gets a weird magical feeling from it. In the meantime, Lester struggles to wield the Servaresta because his compatibility is low. The harder he tries to wield it, the lesser his compatibility becomes. It gets to a point where the weapon acts out and points in Ayato's direction. At first, Ayato struggles to get the weapon, but after a second trial, he subdues the Servaresta and sticks it to the ground. Claudia, who witnesses everything, cheers him on, and his compatibility rate reads 97%. Later that evening, Ayato heads to Claudia's bedroom in the females' dormitory building. Earlier on, Claudia asked a favor of him and told him to meet her in her room at night to get details. In the present, Ayato lets himself in Claudia's room and its owner heads out dressed in a nightrobe. "Make yourself feel at home," Claudia says, while taking a seat on her bed. Ayato heads straight to the point and questions Claudia about why she summoned him to her room. In turn, Claudia shows Ayato the flies of some students who were forced to withdraw from the next Phoenix Festa competition due to injury. While Ayato goes through the documents, he realizes that the students were attacked by someone just like Julius was earlier. Claudia thinks the same way, but lacks proof to back up the fact. However, she reveals that the disciplinary committee has strong suspicions against Lester McPhail and his partner, Randy Hook. Reason being that both suspects have no alibi for the time of the previous day's attack. However, one thing Claudia knows is that Julius is the next student at risk of an attack. She falls back on the favor she spoke of to Ayato and asks him to stay by Julius's side for the time being. She has reason to believe that Julius will not be able to handle herself the next time she is attacked. Out of sheer curiosity, Ayato questions Claudia about why it has to be him who will protect Julius. But she replies by saying that Julius has gotten more attached to him than anyone else. Another thing on Ayato's mind is the fact that Claudia seems quite concerned about Julius. When he asks why, Claudia states that she is the council's president and she has to be protective of the students at the academy. As expected, Ayato agrees to watch over Julius, but Claudia speaks of rewarding him in some way. The following morning, Ayato meets up with Julius, but not in school this time. Upon seeing Julius, Ayato freezes for a few seconds because he likes her outfit. When he voices out, Julius feels quite shy but finds a way to cover it up. She then proceeds to give Ayato a tour around some parts of the island, begging from a place where all Festa finals are held. The tour goes on to a point where Julius makes a stop at a restaurant so she can have lunch with Ayato. Ayato is quite shocked that Julius, despite being a princess, picked such a basic restaurant. When he asks her why, she replies by saying that her friends recommended it to her. Ayato is quite shocked that Julius has friends because he previously thought her to be a loner. However, Ayato reveals that her friends are back in her home country. Moving on, Ayato brings up the topic of Julius's safety and speaks of an attack on her life. Even at that, Julius still wants to continue with her life because she does not want someone else to dictate her destiny. Soon Lester arrives at the restaurant and tries to confront Julius. This time, Ayato steps up and dares Lester to do something stupid. Although powerful, Ayato is not intimidated by Lester's attack. Instead, he declines to take part in a duel with him and sends him off with his companions. In his absence, Julius smiles and compliments Ayato for being tough. At sunset, Ayato walks past the woods with Julius. While at it, Julius admits that she enjoyed her time with Ayato. Along the line, she sees a bunch of LeWolf's students and realizes that she is in danger. Even at that, she smiles and beats the hell out of the students. After she is done teaching them a lesson, she grabs one of the students with an odd hairstyle and interrogates him about the person who sent him. The student reveals that the person who sent him was not someone he knew. When asked what he looked like, he describes a tall person dressed in a black outfit. He even spots the person in the woods and points Julius in the right direction. Julius wastes no time to charge after him while Ayato is forced to follow since he is charged with keeping her safe. A guy dressed in black shoots Ayato with a light arrow, but it deals no damage to him. In the end, the attacker and his companions use the opportunity to flee from the woods. Julius meets up with Ayato a bit worried because he would have been injured. After she confirms that he is fine, she asks him if he will be free at night. At nightfall, Hayato heads to Julius's bedroom at the female's dormitory building. Thank goodness that this time he was invited in. However, Julius tells him to take out his clothes and he freaks out a bit. Julius then clarifies things by telling Ayato that she wants to fix his torn shirt. Along the line, Ayato finds a picture of Julius standing with a bunch of kids. When he asks Julius about the picture, she replies by saying that the kids are her friends from her home country. She begins to tell a tale of what happened in the past when she was a kid. Back then in her home country, Lizeltania, Julius often sneaked out of the palace without permission to go play. One day, she lost her way back home and got cornered in the slums by a group of vulgar thugs. Fortunately, a bunch of girls appeared and saved her from the thugs. After returning to the palace, she learned that the kids were from the orphanage in the slums. In the present, Julius narrates that she started following the girls to sneak out and play. She kept her status of a princess hidden from them, but she suspected that the nuns at that time knew who she was. Julius reveals that the orphanage was created by a foundation established by her late mother, but in recent times it has lost its funding, which is why she came to the academy. After she finishes with the shirt, she hands it over to Ayato and sends him home. The following day, Ayato heads to class and sees Julius reading a strange letter. During lunch break, Julius leaves the class after telling Ayato that she has something to do. In her absence, Claudia finds out that she left school after reading a letter. She feels quite concerned about Julius because she believes that her life is at risk. This also makes Ayato consider the fact that the letter was written by her previous attackers. While reasoning with Claudia, Ayato finds out that Julius left without saying a word because she wants to protect him. This alone makes him recall the time in the past when his sister promised to protect him. He then snaps back into reality and decides to go after Julius. Before he makes it past the door, Claudia throws Haruka's former weapon for him so he can use it in battle. In the meantime, Julius charges into an uncompleted building in search of her attacker. When she settles in, she calls upon her attacker and tells him to reveal himself. The person in the shadows is none other than a student named Silas Norman. Silas is quite impressed that Julius was able to find out who he was before coming to the building. However, it took some serious detective work for Julius to find out who Silas was. Even Silas admits that he was quite sloppy when covering his tracks. Despite that, he promises to leave Julius under the condition that she withdraws from the Phoenix. After hearing this, Julius draws out her weapon, signifying that she will not succumb to Silas's wishes. Soon, Lester arrives at the scene, pissed about the fact that Silas is the one behind the attacks on Julius. Julius then tells him that another academy hired Silas, and he has been attacking strong students enrolled in the Phoenix. After hearing this, Lester gets pissed because he is now aware that Sila betrayed his comrades. In anger, he takes his weapon to land an attack on Silas, but it gets blocked. Reason being that one of Silas's men was able to block the attack before it could reach Silas. 3 other men dressed in black descend from above to fight Lester. At Silas's mark, they take off their hoods, and it turns out that they are not human. Silas likens them to dolls, as he controls them using his powers. A battle begins as Lester lands a nasty attack that sends most of the dolls to the ground. However, the dolls recover quickly and return the favor. After he recovers, a bunch of dolls surround him and beat the shit out of him. In the meantime, Julius uses her magical powers to wipe out a wave of dolls in one sweep. Sadly, she struggles to keep up with the rest in close combat since she is greatly outnumbered. Despite her efforts, she gets picked up and slammed into a wall. While in her weak state, she realizes that the academy that Silas is working for and says it. According to her, Sila is working for the Alicant Academy. She thinks so because no school other than Alicant is capable of mass-producing armor that can withstand magical attacks. Silas, on the other hand, dreads the fact that Julius has figured him out. At first, he wanted to enjoy the feeling of slowly torturing Julius, but now he has to make sure that she dies quickly. Before he can chop Julius's head off, Ayato arrives at the scene at super speed and saves Julius from imminent death. Julius and Silas are left shocked because they were not expecting a third party in the building. Ayato heads to a higher level of the building carrying Julius in his arms to see if she is alright. Despite being saved, Julius wonders why Ayato came for her. She believes that her fight is hers to bear, but Ayato tells her that he has decided to protect her. These words shock Julius as she tries to wrap her head around what is going on. Soon, Silas arrives at the scene with a bigger doll and brags about having 100 dolls that will take Ayato out. Despite being outnumbered, Ayato looks calm and collected because he is able to see through Silas. As the dolls begin opening fire at Ayato, he activates his magical powers and uses them to slice all 100 dolls at incredible speeds. Even Silas is left shocked by Ayato's abilities because he underestimated him. Julius, on the other hand, wonders what kind of person Ayato is. She also insists that Ayato puts her down, but her requests get declined. Another round of battle begins as Silas summons another wave of dolls at Ayato. While at it, Ayato analyzes Silas and his soldiers and finds out the limitations of their abilities. He explores these limitations and uses his powers to wipe out most of the dolls. Silas is left frustrated at this point because he is running out of dolls. When Ayato is done killing all the dolls, Silas summons his trump card, a giant magical doll. As the giant doll charges at Ayato, he takes note of his limbs and movement patterns and uses the data he gets to his advantage. Since Ayato is a lot faster, he uses his speed to land lethal attacks on the doll's limbs to the extent that he kills it. Now Silas is out of dolls, but he manages to fly away from the building using his powers. At this point, Julius assists by providing Ayato with flight support so they can catch up to Silas in no time. While in midair, Ayato shows no mercy as he gets a clean slice of Silas and throws him to the ground. However, he is sure that the fall will not kill Silas because he is a Genistella too. Ayato then tells Julius that Claudia will be waiting for Silas when he gets to the ground. Just then, Ayato's magical powers overwhelm him, and he gets bound by an enchanted chain. In pain, he yells and falls unconscious. Sometime in the past, Haruka placed a seal on Ayato to imprison his magical power. It appeared that she did it to protect Ayato back then, to protect him. In the present, Ayato regains consciousness and finds himself lying on Julius's lap. When Julius notices that he is awake, she smiles because she was previously worried about him. Out of sheer curiosity, Julius questions Ayato about the spell binding his powers, and he replies by saying that his sister put the spell on him. However, to date, he does not understand why his sister put the spell on him. Moving on, Ayato volunteers to become Julius's partner for Phoenix. Julius, who is quite caught up in the moment, lets her guard down and agrees for Ayato to become her partner. However, the fact that Ayato genuinely cares about her makes her see him as an incredible person. Later that evening, just before nightfall, Silas runs for his life, trying to get away from Claudia. At some point, Claudia reaches him, but leaves him barely alive. Yabuki, who is currently in the shadows, smiles because Claudia has some hidden plans up her sleeves. She intends to use Silas to take advantage of the Alicon Academy. Meanwhile, a security camera watches his secret conversation with Claudia, and the persons behind it prepare their next plan of action. The following day, some student council presidents from the different academies gather at a hotel within the Rika Academy Council. Claudia arrives moments before the meeting begins. An academy's president is not present at the table, and this enrages Dirk Eberwein, LeWolf's student council president. However, another president, Ernest Fairclough, tells him to reduce his tone. Ernest is of the Gerardworth Academy, and he is often referred to as the Holy Knight. He takes up his sword and warns Dirk one more time to keep his tone down. The meeting begins as Dirk questions Claudia about the recent collaboration between Seidukan and Alicant Academy. It appears that both academies are working to co-develop a new type of Lux, which will be useful in battle. However, the Alicant representative, Seikon Shuma, reveals that he gave permission for his academy to proceed with the said project, but he does not know the details of it. To clarify things, Claudia states that her academy's collaboration with Alicant Academy is official, and it will be announced soon. However, some members of the meeting suspect that something is going on behind the scenes. The following day, Ayato dashes down to school because he is late for a training session with Julius. While on the way, he bumps into a student, Tudu Kirin, and falls to the ground. However, Ayato helps her up and apologizes for hitting her to the ground. The conversation with Kirin ends as her uncle violently calls her attention. As time passes, Ayato is seen in a training session with Julius. He maintains his composure while taking nasty attacks from his partner Julius. However, Julius is hell-bent on winning their mini-training session. In the quest to achieve this, she summons an engulfing fireball at Ayato, hoping that it will finish him off. Sadly, Ayato cuts through the flames and points his sword at Julius's neck. After their training session, Julius dreads the fact that she was close to winning against Ayato, but lost. When she voices out, Ayato compliments her by speaking of her large arsenal of moves. A conversation about certain powerful students from other academies comes up as Julius speaks about Ernest Fairclough. According to her, Ernest is an able swordsman known as the Holy Knight. His counterpart at Ji Long, Fan Xinglu, is also said to hold unimaginable power, despite not being old enough to take part in Festus. Ayato speaks of another contestant he heard about recently. While describing her, Julius panics because she is powerful. The person Ayato talks about is none other than Ophelia from the La Wolf Academy. In the meantime, Julius reminds Ayato that they have less than a month to prepare for the Phoenix. She likes the fact that people do not know the full extent of Ayato's abilities, and as such, she would like to keep it that way. She tells Ayato not to show his skills in any unnecessary duels. Soon, Saya arrives at the scene with Lester pissed that Julius is with Ayato. She feels that Julius is monopolizing Ayato, and she has reason to believe that they have been up to no good behind closed doors. Julius ends up arguing with her while Lester struggles to thank Ayato for saving him earlier. Along the line, Claudia enters the room with Ernesta and Camilla, both from the Alicante Academy. After Claudia introduces her guests, Julius quickly gets the gist of things as her academy did not charge Alicante for the Silas incident. She knows that her academy wants in on a technological collaboration with Alicante inasmuch as Claudia tries to sugarcoat it. Ernesta, on the other hand, freaks out at the sight of Ayato. It turns out that she has been meaning to see him because he destroyed all her dolls earlier. Julius and Sei assume the offense to make sure that nothing silly happens to Ayato while in close contact with Ernesta. However, Ernesta whispers to Ayato that things will not work out well for him. After that, she kisses him on the cheek, leaving Saya and Julius utterly pissed. Saya assumes her other personality, which is quite scary and intimidating, causing Ernesta to run back to Camilla. Following that, Camilla apologizes for Ernesta's odd behavior, and then begins a conversation with Sei about weapons. During their conversation, Camilla technically speaks of a weapon type and outlines its technical issues. It turns out that Saya's dad was the one behind the said weapon, and Saya is not happy that Camilla is speaking about it in such ways. She politely tells Camilla to retract her words, but she refuses, causing Sei to get pissed. As Camilla and Ernesta walk away with Claudia, Saya begs Ayato to be her partner in the Phoenix so she can get back at Camilla. Sadly, Ayato is already Julius's partner, and when Saya finds out, she stands by her claims that Julius is monopolizing him. At sunset, while the girls from Alicante walk away from the Seidukan Academy, Ernesta speaks about Ayato and reveals that he is the only one left to worry about. It seems as though she has some messed up plan for the future based on what she tells Camilla. The following day, Ayato walks around the Seidukan Academy with Yabuki, listening to some lectures about the Alicante Academy. According to Yabuki, the Academy's curriculum is divided between the research class that develops their luxes and the practical skills class that fights in the festas. The research class has more influence and is always fighting over good research facilities and promising students. At some point in the lecture, Ayato gets distracted by a man slapping Kirin on her face. It turns out that the man is Tudu Koichiro, Kirin's uncle, but he is the strict type. Before he can lay hands on Kirin again, Ayato intervenes. As soon as Ayato finds out that Tudu is Kirin's uncle, he powers down a little but then warns him not to be abusive towards his niece. Surprisingly, Tudu states that he will take Ayato's words into consideration only if he wins a duel against his niece, Kirin. Ayato immediately accepts the offer because Kirin is at risk if he declines. Before their duel begins, a bunch of students gather around the scene to witness an epic fight between them. Ayato temporarily unbinds himself from his seal and takes out his Orgalux to fight Kirin. Tudu warns her niece not to cross swords with Ayato, else it will break. The duel begins as Kirin charges ferociously at her opponent, using speed and flexibility to her advantage. Soon, Julius arrives at the scene and expresses shock when she sees that Ayato is fighting another student. At the same time, Yabuki records the battle with a device and manages to keep up with the duel's insane speed. While Kirin fights against Ayato, she acknowledges the fact that her opponent is quite skilled. Meanwhile, Ayato is out of time because his magical bounds will come back up any moment. To prevent this from happening, he decides to bet his win in a single power strike. In doing so, Kirin takes advantage of him and slices off his badge, winning the fight in the process. Ayato is left shocked at Kirin's win, but Julius warns that he gets away from the scene since he is barely moments away from collapsing. It is also at this point that he finds out that Kirin is Seidukan's rank 1. Later that morning, Tudu calls Kirin out on the fact that she took so long to win against Ayato. He then reminds her to follow his orders so she can get what she wants in the future. In the meantime, Julius gets alone with Ayato ready to lash out at him. Although she hates the fact that Ayato showed off his fighting skills to the public, she wishes that he defeated Kirin in their previous battle. The conversation in the room changes course as Julius speaks about the people she cannot defeat in the school. The first on her list is Kirin, while the other person is Claudia. Ayato expresses shock as he learns that Claudia is quite the skilled one. According to Julius, Claudia wields the Pandora, an Orgalux which allows her to see the future. Claudia has remained undefeated in the academy, but the difference between Kirin is that Kirin does not wield an Orgalux, nor is she part of the famous cults. She managed to stay at the top rank by defending it with only a Japanese sword. Moving on, Julius tells Ayato that they will have to rethink their plan for Phoenix, since his abilities are no longer a secret. That afternoon, Ayato meets up with Claudia at a pool to get a new school badge. As time passes, Claudia begins a conversation with Ayato about Todo Quichiru, Kirin's uncle. According to her, Todo is an employee of the Seidukan Academy's parent company, the Galaxy Integrated Enterprise Foundation. He wields considerable authority, but he is more than eager to claim a spot on the executive board. To achieve this, he tries his best to wring everything he can out of Kirin. After Ayato hears this, he realizes that he previously was right about Todo forcing Kirin to fight. However, Claudia speaks more about the executive spot to the extent that Ayato asks why she knows so much. She then responds by saying that her mother is an executive. Minutes after the meeting with Claudia, Ayato heads out to his class building. On the way, Kirin sees him and politely seeks an audience with him. While in a room, she thanks Ayato for protecting her from Todo and apologizes for how things went down the previous day. Ayato holds no grudge, and as such, he asked Kirin on the head. He then opens the room's door and finds out that a bunch of students are spying on his conversation. As expected, the ringleader is Yabuki, who is always hell-bent on gathering information. At sunset, Ayato strolls out into the streets with Kirin. On the way, Ayato speaks about his fighting techniques, and Kirin takes interest in them since he is a swordsman like she is. At some point, Ayato gets curious and questions Kirin about what she fights for. Kirin replies by saying that she fights so she can save her father. Ayato, on the other hand, hates the fact that Todo is using Kirin to fulfill his objectives. When he voices out, Kirin states that it is a fair transaction since she will get what she wants in the end. Another conversation comes up as Kirin questions Ayato about how he trains. She wishes to train with him, but when he speaks about Julius, she declines, reason being that her uncle warned her to stay away from Page 1 students. In spite of that, Ayato asks her to join him in his early morning training sessions, and she agrees. That evening, after Ayato drops Kirin off, Saya sneaks, jumps on him from a tree, and holds him in a choking position. Saya is quite interested in who Kirin is, but Ayato currently has issues breathing. When asked what she is doing there, Sei replies by telling Ayato that she was previously looking for him. She wants him to be her tag partner for Phoenix, but Ayato is teaming up with Julius already. Moving on, Saya envisions Kirin's body, and recalls that she is just a first year. Ayato, on the other hand, tells Saya that she is quite like Kirin because they both fight to help their fathers. About a week later, Julius questions Ayato about his relationship with Kirin during lunch break. Ayato replies accordingly as he explains that he has been training with Kirin in the morning. Although Julius does not like the idea of the training, she calms down because Ayato is not that close to Kirin. Meanwhile, Ayato notices that Julius has not touched her food yet. He then offers to swap meals with her if the pepper in her food is too hot. However, Julius makes a fuss about finishing a meal she orders. It takes a bit of convincing for her to switch dishes with Ayato, but she does in the end. Sadly, Ayato tastes her previous dish and yells because of how spicy it is. The following day at dawn, Camilla wakes Ernesta up to proceed with her plans. Ernesta mounts her control systems and watches as Ayato sprints with Kirin in the woods. On Ayato's end, he notices that his view is foggy and ends up holding Kirin's hand, so he will not lose her. While at it, both parties notice the presence of potential threats just behind their position. Two lizard-looking creatures storm out of the woods to attack Ayato and Kirin. Ayato assumes the offense and uses a normal Lux to fight against the vile creatures. Anytime he slices off an enemy's part, it reattaches to its initial position, hence setting him at a disadvantage. At some point, Kirin leads the offense as she uses her sword to slice the creatures into tiny bits. In doing so, she slices the core of the monsters and kills them permanently. After the fight, another monster attacks both students again, but this time with fireballs. While Ayato runs for his life, the ground opens, and he falls in. Kirin tries her best to hold on to Ayato, but she ends up falling into the hole with him. Ernesta smiles on her end because Kirin and Ayato fell into a hole. It appears that she has something else rolled up her sleeves for both students. In the meantime, Ayato holds Kirin and tries to remain afloat since Kirin cannot swim. While at it, a dragon-type monster reveals itself and tries to attack him. Kirin gets the same feeling from the monster as she did from the smaller ones above ground. Ayato activates his magic just so he can protect Kirin from taking damage. When he gets slammed into a wall, Kirin asks to know if he is alright. He then takes out the Cervaresta and uses it to carve a platform on a pillar so Kirin can sit. Following that, he activates another part of his power and uses it to slice the monster into two. After the monster's passing, his magical bounds grab hold of him, leaving him in serious pain. In pain, Ayato yells and passes out momentarily. Minutes after he wakes up, Kirin realizes that he can only fight at full strength for about 5 minutes. When asked why he fights, he reveals that he wants to help Julius. Upon hearing this, Kirin assumes that Ayato is romantically involved with Julius, and then shifts away from him a little. Out of sheer curiosity, Ayato questions Kirin about the reason she fights. Kirin then replies by saying that her father is being detained as a criminal, so she wants to save him. Sometime in the past, about 5 years ago, someone broke into a shop where Kirin's dad and daughter were. Back then, Kirin's dad ended up killing the criminal in the quest to save his daughter. However, the authorities put Kirin's dad in prison since he was a Genestella. Ayato tells Kirin that she does not need to throw herself at her uncle's mercy to get what she wants. He speaks of a different path and wishes that she chooses it. Kirin feels scared about doing things on her own, but Ayato assures her that he will help her. Soon, the rescue squad arrives at the scene to save both students from the hole. Later that morning, Kirin meets up with her uncle, who is quite worried about her. Despite that, he reminds her that all he needs from her is her power and nothing else. At this point, Kirin sees that her uncle only views her as a tool in his hands. When her uncle tells her to cut ties with Ayato, she drops the line and says no. This time, as she gets smacked in the face, she stands her ground and tells her uncle that she will do what she wants. Tudu is pissed at this point, as he did not expect Kirin to put up such behavior towards him. Kirin blocks his fists as he tries to lay hands on her again. This time, she is dead serious about following her uncle's ways. However, she appreciates Tudu for his help so far and walks away from the scene. That afternoon, students from the Seidukan Academy gather around an arena to witness a duel between Kirin and Ayato. Kirin is quite excited about the duel because she is fighting someone of her choice. In the meantime, Ayato takes out a normal sword to fight so he can keep up with Kirin's speed. The duel begins as Kirin takes up her sword and charges at Ayato. While swinging her swords, she deploys different techniques to prevent Ayato from reading her movements. It works for a while, but Ayato manages to keep up with her fighting pace. Surprisingly, Ayato changes his fighting style and switches to another weapon as he throws the former at his opponent. Although shocked, Kirin does not fret. Rather, she returns the favor by landing speed attacks on Ayato. Sadly, Ayato changes her fighting style again and switches to a dagger. Even when Kirin thinks that she has an advantage, Ayato takes advantage of an opening and slams her to the ground. After Kirin's defeat, Julius and Saya look happy that Ayato came out of the duel successfully. Meanwhile, Claudia enters the room and reveals that Kirin intends to speak to Ayato about something. Kirin enters the room looking shy because she wants to ask a favor of Ayato. She requests that Ayato allow her to join his training sessions, and Saya agrees. Meanwhile, Julius does not look all happy with the decision. Tudu knocks violently on the room's door asking to see his niece, Kirin. When Ayato lets him in, he wastes no time trying and convince Kirin to get back on his side. While at it, Kirin puts it to him that she will fight on her own, and not by his ways. This upsets Tudu to the extent that he tries to raise his hand on Kirin. However, Ayato is fast enough to stop Tudu from beating Kirin up. In anger, Tudu threatens to expose things about Kirin's father to the public. Claudia, after hearing this, makes Tudu remember his place in the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. The fact that her mother is an executive makes Tudu accept defeat and walk away from the room. Before he leaves, Kirin weeps and thanks him for all that he did for her. Following that, Ayato makes Kirin feel better by stopping her from crying. He agrees to be called by his first name so he can foster a good relationship with her. Elsewhere, 2 students from the Alicante Academy act as puppets to test out a new prototype doll that Ernesta is working on. Based on the results of the test, Camilla is quite sure that her side stands a high chance of winning the Phoenix. However, Ernesta is also excited because she could get data on Ayato's skills and stats. From the looks of things, she still has some devious plans rolled up her sleeves. Later that evening, while Kirin takes off her clothes in the female's locker room, Saya arrives and begins a conversation with her. At first, Saya asks to confirm if Kirin is fighting to save her father, and when she gets the reply, she asks Kirin to be her partner for the upcoming tournament. The following day, Saya and Kirin team up to train in a simulation arena. It all goes well for them at first, but they lose the training session due to a lack of synchronization. Julius and Ayato watch all that goes down from the other side of the building, and they can smell the frustration from Saya's face. During a lunch break, a female student meets with Ayato and politely asks for an autograph, since he is the Academy's new rank 1. In her absence, Julius puts up a weird attitude because Ayato is now being treated as a celebrity. Although she likes the support from people, she has no interest in being used for worthless endeavors. Moving on, Ayato expresses shock over the fact that Saya and Kirin are now partners. Saya clarifies things by telling him that she wants to defeat Camilla in the Phoenix. Despite that, Ayato tells her that she needs to work on her synchronization with Kirin. Saya takes the advice a little too seriously, and she ends up canceling her training session scheduled for the next day so she can strengthen her bond with Kirin. The following day, Kirin and Saya chill at a park contemplating what they will do to strengthen their bond. Saya expresses a hard time coming up with an activity because according to her, she has not bonded with anyone in a long time. Kieran feels the same way too, but Kieran intends to work something out. She suggests meeting up during their free period so they can do something together. When asked what she would like to do, Sei replies by saying shopping. During their free period, both girls head out of the academy's building to go shopping as planned. Saya intends to get her dad a present because his birthday is coming up soon. When she voices out, Kieran suggests a bunch of things, but Saya declines buying them because her dad is not into such stuff. At some point, she heads to the slums with Kieran into an illegal weapons store. There she sees an old Lux piece that resembles a pistol. After taking it out of the rack, she asks the dealer to know if it still has its original generator. After the dealer replies yes, Saya pays for the piece and heads out of the store. Saya is glad that she got the piece because it contains a generator that mimics her dad's research. She then explains the whole concept of the Lux to Kieran, and then asks her to suggest another activity. At sunset, Saya advises Kieran to stand up for herself more often. In Saya's defense, she has gotten used to the harsh treatment she used to get from her uncle in the past. Saya, after hearing this, tells Kieran that she can become a better person. She goes on to call out some of Kieran's good qualities to make her feel better about herself. When asked why she chose Kieran as her partner, Saya replies by saying that Kieran mimics Ayato's swordsmanship style. Another reason is that Kieran is quietly determined to accomplish what she wants. Towards the end of the conversation, Saya tells Kieran to address her by her first name since they are Joutag partners. The following day, Saya and Kieran display a significant improvement in their synchronization levels to the point that they beat their previous performance by a large margin. Later that evening, Dirk Eberwein and a student, Corona, head into the disciplinary faction of the LeWolf Academy. They both arrive at a cell that hosts the inmate Irene Urzais. Dirk wants Irene to participate in the Phoenix so she can get rid of Ayato. When Irene asks why, Dirk tells her that Ayato wields Servaresta. After Dirk is done debriefing Irene, he unbinds her from chains, and she can prepare to work. After some days, candidates gather around an arena to mark the commencement of the Phoenix Festa. Maidaith Mesa, the chairman of the Fest Management Committee, debriefs the audience about the Festa and goes on with a speech. In the meantime, Ayato picks interest in him because he seems awfully young to be a chairman. Julius, who is here at the time, explains that Maidaith is a Seidokan alumnus. According to her, he is a skilled fighter who triumphed in the Phoenix. Moving on, Mesa goes on to give details about some changes to the tournament. He speaks about using autonomous weapons in battles and reveals that only contestants are allowed to substitute themselves in the arena with one. This alone raises the eyebrows of many in the crowd, but Ernesta seems happy with the new development. After Mesa is done with his speech, the crowd cheers loudly, while the various council presidents smile in regards to the tournament. Ayato and Julius remain in the building since they will be having their first match there. While in the lobby, Ayato sees Lester and asks him to join his group for lunch. Lester declines the offer by saying that he does not want to be friends with Ayato. Rather, he looks forward to fighting him in the tournament. As Lester walks away from the scene, Saya arrives and hugs Ayato. Julius feels quite uncomfortable at this point as she struggles to remain calm. Kieran also arrives bearing a present for Ayato. It turns out that the present contains lunch for Ayato. According to Kieran, Saya helped with the cooking too. He pats her on the head. Saya presents another pack of food to Ayato, and this time, Julius seems interested in the meal. However, Ayato is forced to pat Saya on the head, since he did the same thing to Kieran earlier. As time goes on, they all finish eating the meal, and Saya looks pregnant. Since it is almost time for the first match of the tournament, the commentators go live on television to give an intro. The fire commentator is a lady named Yanase Miko, while the other is a lady, Jie Long. Miko goes on to announce details about the tournament, beginning with the number of participants down to the rules. According to her, a match ends when both of a team's members have their school badges destroyed or when they have lost consciousness, surrendered, or otherwise been judged to have lost. At the appointed time, Miko announces Ayato and Julius into the fighting arena as the first representatives of the Seidokan Academy. Miko drops a warm welcome for Ayato as she announces that he recently entered the rank 1 spot of the academy. She does the same thing for Julius by speaking about her elite status and impressive fighting skills. The battle starts as the electronic referee gives the signal. While the opponents charge at Ayato's side, Julius realizes that they are going for close combat. For this reason, she steps away from Ayato and allows him to do his thing. Ayato temporarily breaks the seal binding his powers as he summons the Servaresta. The crowd cheers happily at Ayato's display of magic. In the meantime, Ayato accelerates instantly past his enemies and slices off their badges within the blink of an eye. When Ayato is pronounced the winner of the battle, Miko looks stunned by his abilities. On the way out of the fighting arena, Ayato reminds himself that he need not let anyone find out about his limits. However, Julius is happy that Ayato flaunted breaking his seal, because everyone seems to think that it was a performance. As they walk towards the end of the alley, Julius tells Ayato to be mindful of the things he says to the press. Later that afternoon, Alencont Academy's new puppets are flaunted at the battle arena for the next fight. In the meantime, Camilla lashes out at Ernesta for publicly admitting to creating the puppets. In Ernesta's defense, she did so because people assumed that her academy was getting preferential treatment thanks to the change in regulations. She does not want future opponents to say that they lost because they did not know what they were up against. Camilla, after hearing this, cools off, but Ernesta assures her that her puppets will win. Moving on, Miko introduces Ernesta's puppets to the crowd by giving out their names. The first one, which is an autonomous puppet, is nicknamed Artie, while the other one is nicknamed Rimsey. Artie gives his opponent a 1-minute head start so they can attack him as they wish within that period. Rimsey also assures her enemies that she will not attack them within the 1 minute her partner specified. The match begins as their opponents begin to attack. An opponent, Gerd, goes after Rimsey while his partner Moritz, a page 1, goes after Artie. Moritz activates his magical powers and furiously charges Moritz to end him in a single strike. However, his plan fails because his attack fails to destroy Artie's phantom shield. By this, Artie and Rimsey win the battle without lifting a finger. Julius, on the other hand, tries to wrap her head around the fact that Rimsey and Artie are very strong opponents. Even Saya admits that they are going to be a problem in the tournament. A call comes in from her dad, and she picks it up. While on the call, Saya's dad tells his daughter that he has sent weapons that she would use for the tournament. However, Saya insists that she will manage the weapon she has, since it would take a while for the package to get to her. In the meantime, Rimsey and Artie meet with their master, Ernesta. Ernesta looks excited that they put up an outstanding performance while in battle against their opponents. Later that afternoon, Julius and Ayato are seen running to meet up at the start of Saya's match. On the way, a street fight catches their attention, and they go closer to have a look. It turns out that Irene from the Alencont Academy is the one at the center of the street fight. She beats a couple of thugs and throws them to the ground while the crowd cheers for her. After beating up the last thug, she sees Ayato and recognizes him from the picture Dirk showed her earlier. As she draws closer to Ayato to speak to him, Julius obstructs her about her business with Ayato. Irene responds by telling Julius that she has no business with her. Meanwhile, Julius is fixated on the fact that Irene was previously enjoying herself in the street fight. The way she speaks provokes Irene a little to the extent that she deploys her lux. Julius and Ayato are fast enough to move to the other side of the scene before things can get nasty. Just then, Irene's sister Priscilla arrives at the scene and scolds Irene for having a fight. She then forces Irene to apologize to Ayato and Irene for being hostile to them. Priscilla walks away from the scene with her sister to prepare for the tournament. In their absence, Julius reminds Ayato that Irene is not after her. This alone makes Ayato realize that Irene was after him from the start. His conversation ends with Julius when he gets a notification that Saya's match is on. At the fighting arena, Saya and Kirin are introduced by the commentators. Shortly after that, Saya deploys a cannon-type lux to use it in battle against her opponents. The match begins as the electronic referee gives the signal. During the battle, Kirin slices off the badge of her opponent within seconds of close-range combat. At the same time, Saya wields her large weapon and uses it to block all attacks on the enemy. It gets to a point where she activates the lux and sets a hidden trap for her opponent to fall victim to. In the end, she shoots a deadly shot at her opponent and wins the battle instantly. Because of how well she fought with her partner, the crowd cheered loudly in their name. Moments after the match, Saya showers in the bathroom with Kirin. While at it, Saya gives some lectures about how her lux works. Along the line, Saya receives a notification that Ayato is behind the door. 4 days later, Ayato and Julius are seen at the battle arena, ready for another fight. This time, Ayato allows Julius to assume the lead against both opponents. At the start of the battle, Ayato steps back to allow Julius to engage their opponents, while Julius fires flaming shots at her opponents. Although outnumbered, she manages to defeat her first opponent within seconds of battle. She defeats the second opponent by setting a position-based trap for her, and the battle ends. After she claims the win, Ayato compliments her accordingly and heads out of the arena. Later that day, Julius hands Ayato a bag filled with sandwiches and other snacks. Ayato appreciates the kind gesture and also likes the fact that the food is sweet. When he compliments Julius on her cooking, she becomes shy despite being an uptight person. After Ayato is done eating, Julius sets her head so that he will pat her like he did Kirin and Saya. At first, Ayato does not know what she wants him to do, but after a while, he figures it out and pats Julius's head. Julius feels quite shy at the moment, but she snaps out of it when she gets enough of the head patting. On the other hand, Lester and his partner Randy are in a battle against Irene and Priscilla. They are currently on the move to avoid falling under a potential gravitational field from Irene's lux. At some point, Randy charges at Priscilla since she seems defenseless. Irene, on the other hand, sees this and places Randy under an intense gravitational field. After that, he engages Lester, beats him to the ground, and walks off to finish things with Randy. Seconds later, Randy falls unconscious after being placed under an intense gravitational field for too long. This alone pisses Lester off to the extent that he lands an attack on Irene that knocks her to the ground. It takes some seconds for Irene to recover fully to continue the fight. This time, she walks over to her sister and bites her in the neck like a vampire. It turns out that blood fuels her Lux's power, and this puts Lester at a disadvantage since Priscilla is a regenerative. The second round of battle begins as Irene shoots phantom balls at Lester. At the same time, Lester struggles to move in Irene's gravitational field, and as such, he gets knocked to the ground. As Irene draws closer to him, he grunts in pain from her powers. Finally, he surrenders to Irene and loses the match to her. Ayato on the other side of a screen is left shocked at Irene's powers. After a few days, Claudia congratulates Ayato for making the finals of the tournament. She then seizes the opportunity to lay on Ayato, giving the excuse that she has not spent quality time with him in a while. Although Ayato feels uncomfortable, Claudia insists on getting with him. Their romantic session ends as Ayato receives a call from Kirin. Kirin states that she has lost sight of Saya in the business district. After the call, Ayato promises to make time for Claudia when he gets back from getting Saya. Later that morning, while in search of Saya, Ayao bumps into Priscilla. It turns out that Priscilla is being chased by some thugs. Ayato ditches the thugs and helps Priscilla to the top of a building where she will not be seen. Conversely, Priscilla appreciates Ayato for saving her from the thugs. When asked why the thugs were after her, Priscilla states that her sister caused a commotion in a casino earlier. One thing that bothers Ayato is the fact that Priscilla previously called her sister to come to save her. Soon, Irene arrives at the scene fully prepared to give Ayato a beating. Although Priscilla explains that Ayato saved her earlier, Irene is still hell-bent on fighting Ayato because she does not trust him. However, she snaps out of her angry state when Priscilla scolds her. After Irene powers down, she questions Ayato about what he is doing at that location. Before Ayato can say a word, a call comes in from Saya, and it turns out that Kirin has found her already. After the call ends, Ayato explains that he was out in search of his friend who got lost. At sunset, Irene violently breaks into Dirk's office, pissed about the fact that her sister was attacked. Since her deal with Dirk ensured her sister's protection, she is furious that Priscilla was still attacked. However, Dirk explains things to Irene by telling her that his men could not protect Priscilla because Ayato was involved. Their meeting ends shortly as Irene reaches a mutual ground with her boss, Dirk. In her absence, Dirk tells Corona to do a reading of the future. Based on Corona's readings, Dirk is sure that Irene and Priscilla will win their match. Later that day, Ayato tells Julius that he was invited to dinner at Irene's place. After hearing this, Julius becomes pissed, but she settles to join Ayato at the dinner. Moments later, they both arrive at Irene's apartment, and Ayato rings the doorbell. Priscilla greets them and welcomes them into the house with a smiley face. Upon entering the house, Julius sees Irene and begins to throw words at her. Irene returns the favor by putting up a nice display of sarcasm. It all ends when Priscilla arrives at the dining table with a variety of food. Irene looks excited at the food because Priscilla cooks well. Even Julius affirms the fact when she tastes the food. A conversation starts at the table when Julius speaks about nightlife. Irene then explains that she is out earning money in the casinos because she needs it. About a few years ago, she borrowed a vast sum of money from Dirk Eberwein. Back then, she was paying the money off little by obeying Dirk's every order. The contract she signed at that time restricts her participation in the festas, and she cannot use the money from there to pay her debt. In the present, Irene narrates all these to Ayato and Julius. It is at this point that Irene reveals that her orders are to destroy Ayato. Upon hearing this, Julius freaks out, but Irene assures her that she cannot do anything stupid over the diner. When asked why Ayato, Irene replies by saying that Ayato's Lux is a problem to Dirk. She also adds that a certain female student wielded the same Lux, and this shocks Ayato. Ayato recalls the scrambled data he saw about his sister when he first met Claudia. He snaps back into reality and maintains a calm demeanor despite being furious. After dinner, Priscilla sees her guests out of the apartment. On the way, she reveals that Irene fights for her sake. Julius, on the other hand, is quite fixated on the fact that Irene draws blood from her sister. When she voices out, Priscilla reveals that she is not bothered about it. However, she does not like the effect that the Gravi Scythe has on her sister. Later that evening, after Ayato drops Julius off at her dormitory, he calls Claudia to speak to her about something. When he gets to Claudia's apartment, he finds her sleeping weirdly on her table. He then calls out to her to see if she is okay, only for her to wake up and attack him with her Luxes. It takes a touch to the face for Claudia to return to her normal self, and when she does, she apologizes to Ayato. Moving on, Ayato questions her about her issues, and she goes on to ask him to join her team in the next year's festa as a member of her team. Ayato agrees to join her team under the condition that Julius joins too. After that, Claudia explains the truth behind her luxes. According to her, she experiences death in her dreams anytime she sleeps at night, in exchange for tremendous power from her luxes. None of the luxes wielders before her could withstand it for more than 3 days. After hearing this, Ayato is quite shocked that Claudia is going through such torment. However, Claudia speaks of a wish that she wants to be granted, and she needs her luxes to accomplish it. When asked what the wish is, she insists on keeping it a secret. Moving on, Ayato heads straight to the point by asking about the Gravi Scythe. Claudia responds by saying that the Lux influences its wielder's mindset, personality, and even their physical body to suit its preferences. After hearing this, Otto thinks about Irene, but he snaps back and thanks Claudia for the info. In the meantime, Claudia draws closer to her and tries to convince him to spend the night with her, but she politely declines. Elsewhere, Irene is seen smiling at a pile of dead bodies she killed recently while her sister is in bed wondering where she is. Sometime in the past, Irene's hometown fell victim to war. Back then, she was in a bad financial situation, and she had to look out for her little sister Priscilla. One day, Dirk met Irene and gave her the Gravi Scythe. Upon touching the Lux, it bonded with her and changed her personality. In the present, Irene wakes up from sleep and her sister informs her that they will soon be up for the next battle. After hearing this, Irene gets up from a couch and pats Priscilla on the head. She then assures her that all will be well and she should leave the fighting to her. Following that, she deploys the Gravi Scythe and sucks some blood from her sister's neck. At the same time, Julius meets Ayato in the waiting room and notices that he is in deep thought. He then speaks of something he would like to try out during the battle against Irene and Priscilla. When Julius asks what it is, Ayato whispers some words to Julius's ears. As they both approach the battle arena, Julius tells Ayato that they need to win their match no matter who their opponent is. At some point, they get announced into the battle arena alongside their opponents, Priscilla and Irene. Ayato puts up a wonderful display by temporarily breaking the seal on his magical powers while Irene activates her Lux ready to fight. The battle begins as Julius fires multiple flaming shots at Irene. Ayato joins in the attack as he uses the Serverseta to land multiple speed attacks on Irene. Irene, on the other hand, moves quickly to dodge all incoming attacks. It gets to a point where she deploys gravitational fields and aims them at Ayato, but she misses her target. Julius then seizes the opportunity to shoot multiple fireballs at Irene, but she fails as Irene erects a static barrier. While in the barrier, Irene draws more blood from her sister and gains more power. While at it, Julius tells Ayato to enact the idea he spoke of because they are running out of time. After Irene is done charging up, Ayato provokes her by speaking about her sister. He charges at her using his speed and lands calculated attacks on her Lux. Irene blocks the attack and then realizes that Ayato is after the Gravi Sheath. For this reason, she maintains her distance and summons multiple phantom balls at her opponents. Ayato stands back and tells Julius to concentrate her powers on defense. As the phantom balls reach his position, he uses the Serverseta to destroy them at high speeds. Irene is left shocked at Ayato's seed to the extent that she does not notice when he comes at her. Surprisingly, she blocks Ayato's attacks but is left at the mercy of Julius's position-based trap. The crowd cheers wildly because of how Ayato's side fights. Priscilla runs after her sister because she fears that she might be weak. When the smoke clears out, Ayato and Julius see that Irene survived the attack. For some reason, Ayato detects a weird aura coming from Irene. At this point, Irene goes full vamp mode on her sister and emits a huge gravitational shockwave. Julius struggles on her knees while Ayato manages to get up. He intends to do something about the Gravi Scythe because Priscilla's life is in danger. As he draws closer to Irene, he calls her out to let go of Priscilla. Irene realizes herself at some point and leaves her sister, but the Gravi Scythe takes control of her. The shockwave that she emits this time is much more powerful. Despite that, Ayato absorbs a lot of magical energy and uses it to knock the Gravo Scythe off Irene's hands. He then jumps into midair and stabs the Lux's core to pieces. In the end, Irene falls to the ground, and Ayato's side is pronounced the winner of the battle. Claudia smiles on her end because Ayato put up an impressive performance. Unfortunately, Ayato falls to the ground because of the seal on his powers. Enchanted chains consume him again, and this time he yells loudly in pain. Dirk, who watches this on the other side of the screen, realizes that Ayato can only utilize his powers for a limited amount of time. Some other students smile at the sight of Ayato in pain because they now know the limitations of his power. Later that day, at sunset, Priscilla wakes up and finds herself lying in a hospital bed. Irene apologizes to her sister for draining her blood earlier. However, when asked about the results of the previous match, Irene replies by saying that she lost. She also makes a joke about Ayato destroying the Gravi Scythe like a madman. In the end, Priscilla reveals that she wants to fight alongside Irene instead of being the person who is being protected all the time. After hearing this, Irene laughs and looks forward to the future. The following day, Ayato lies in pain on a couch trying to recover from his previous battle. Julius is quite bothered by the fact that Ayato's secret is out, but despite that, Ayato tries to put up a facade that he is fine. Even at that, Ayato tells Julius that he cannot break the promise he made to her. This alone makes her feel shy, but she calms down when Ayato speaks about breaking his seal permanently. Julius consoles Ayato by telling him that he is not in the battle alone. She draws closer to him and tries to go in for a kiss, but Saya, Kieran, and Claudia ruin the moment. Each one of the girls takes turns to offer caring services to Ayato, but Claudia wins in the end because she has no matches in the tournament. In the end, Yabuki smiles from the back of the room, wondering how everything will play out. Fan Xinglu of the Jilong Academy begins a training session with her students. From the looks of things, the students need to meet up with Fan Xinglu's speed and stop her from moving. However, despite their numbers, they struggle to keep up with Fan Xinglu's speed, and as such they lie weak on the ground. After the training session, a girl named Hufina arrives at the scene and informs Fan Xinglu about some debriefing. While Fan Xinglu walks away with Hufina, she speaks about Ayato of the Seidukan Academy, as she is quite impressed with his performance so far in the Phoenix Festa. Soon, a set of twins Shenyun and Shenhua arrive and meet with Fan Xinglu to speak about their next opponent in the tournament. It appears that they will be going against their colleagues in the next battle round, and they see it as a problem. After they voice out, Fan Xinglu tells them to do as they please. Later that day, Julius sits in a waiting room surfing the internet. Based on her observations, information about Ayato's battle limits is now widespread. She then checks up on Ayato to see if he will be good enough to fight the next round of battle. Ayato claims that he is okay, but he will only be able to go all out on an opponent within a brief moment. After hearing this, Julius speaks about their next opponent and reveals that they will be tough to defeat. However, she has a battle strategy she would like to implement on them when the time comes. She then whispers the plan to Ayato to avoid prying ears. Moving on, the commentators at the battle arena go on to reveal the list of the remaining candidates contesting in the Phoenix. It appears that Ernesta's puppets are still in the tournament, including Kieran and Saya, both from the Seidukan Academy. At some point, the commentators announce Ayato and Julius into the fighting arena, and they do the same for the opposing side. Ayato and Julius are up against Songran and Luo Kunjan of the Jilong Academy. Before the start of the battle, Kunjan tells Ayato that he will go all out on him despite his condition. According to him, he would have preferred to fight Ayato when he is at full power, but it is not possible. Julius, on the other hand, marks a spot on the ground, as it is part of their secret strategy. The battle begins as the commentator gives the signal. Kunjan wastes no time to engage Ayato in close-range combat. He amplifies the power of his punches using magic to deal good damage to his opponent. After landing the first attack on Ayato, he confirms that Ayato is not in his strongest form. In the meantime, however, Julius enacts one part of her strategy by erecting a firewall that divides the battle arena. She is now left to fight against Songran alone with no interference from Kunjun. The second battle round begins as Julius summons flaming attacks at Songran. Songran, on the other hand, moves quickly and dodges most of the flaming attacks. He then notices that Julius is using most of her powers to erect the firewall and intends to exploit that disadvantage. On the other side of the wall, Ayato switches to defense to avoid consuming too much magical energy. It gets to a point where Kunjan admits that he will not stand a chance against Ayato at full power. Out of respect for Ayato, Kunjan intends to finish the battle in a single strike. Meanwhile, Songran urges Julius to perform her secret skill because Ayato might lose to Kunjan very soon. He then charges at Julius and lands a nasty power punch on her that sends her flying to the ground. The good thing is that she regains control of herself and assumes a good stance before reaching the ground. Following that, she clears a path in the firewall and switches sides with Ayato. This alone shocks both opponents as they fall victim to a surprise attack from Ayato and Julius. In the end, Julius and Ayato are pronounced winners of the fight, and they are now in the quarterfinals of the tournament. Moments later, Ayato heads out of the fighting arena with Julius. On the way, they get intercepted by Songran and Kunjan. At first, Julius thought that they wanted to fight again, but it appears that they are there to offer compliments. Moving on, Kunjan warns Ayato and Julius that their previous strategy will not work on their next opponents. He then reveals their identities, and it turns out that they are the twins from earlier. According to Kunjan, the twins are masters of surprise, and no usual battle strategies work on them. While he speaks, he squeezes his fist because of how he hates the twins, despite the fact that they attend the same academy. Soon, the twins, Shenyun and Shenhua, arrive at the scene and make fun of their next opponents. Both of them manage to provoke Songran and his partner, but Julius and Ayato maintain their composure. Minutes after the meeting with the twins, Julius speaks to Ayato about his wishes at the end of the tournament. From the way he speaks, Julius realizes that he has no wish. However, she speaks about Haruka and questions Ayato if he would not want to find his missing sister. Before she can go into more detail, Saya and Kieran knock on the room's door. Before Kieran comes in, she reveals that she's with someone who wants to see Julius. The person is none other than a girl named Flora from Julius's home country. Flora looks happy to see Julius since it's been a long time. After she introduces herself to Ayato, Julius pats her on the head. She also explains that she is putting on a maid uniform so it would be easier for Julius to identify her. As time passes, Kirin finds out why Julius fights in the Phoenix Festa. In the meantime, Ayato questions Flora about what Julius is like back home. Flora explains that Julius has not changed much as she was always kind to the kids back then at the orphanage. After that, she uses a magical device to display pictures of her memories with Julius. Although they all seem nice, there is one that Julius does not want anyone to see. When Ayato sees it, he covers his face and Julius is forced to take the pictures out. Julius feels quite embarrassed because she previously told Flora to delete the picture. In Flora's defense, the picture is one that she likes. She then speaks about coming over to the academy so she can earn money and help the orphanage. After Julius hears this, she assures her that she will not have to fight since she is sure that she will win the tournament. Later that evening, Ayato arrives in his dorm room and finds out that Yabuki is not around. Thoughts about what Julius said concerning his mind, but he snaps out of it and gets on a call with Irene. While on the call, Irene knows fully well that Ayato intends to speak to Dirk about Haruko. When asked how she knows, she reveals that Dirk told her. Surprised, Ayato tells Irene to pass a message to Dirk because he wants to know about his sister, Haruka. Meanwhile, a black cat watches all that goes down in Ayato's room from the pavement. Irene then speaks of some dangerous allies that Dirk has at his fingertips. One of them includes the Grimalkin, the Wolf's intelligence organization. Before the call ends, Priscilla drags Irene off the screen and tells her to do something. When Irene gets back, she lowers her pride and thanks Ayato for destroying the Gravi Scythe. After the call ends, Ayato lays back on his bed and thinks about his sister. The following day, Yabuki arrives in the room, and Ayato is forced to wake up. Yabuki congratulates Ayato on his advancement into the quarterfinals of the tournament. He then speaks about Ayato's next opponents, and warns him to be careful when the time comes. Based on his research, the twins are quite good at hitting their opponent directly where it hurts. They know how to take advantage of Seizenjutsu, which is a technique that takes the power of a Strega, and optimizes it to leave no vulnerabilities on its wielder. While Yabuki goes on with his lecture, a call comes in from Julius, and Ayato answers it. While on the call, Ayato finds out that Flora intends to see him over lunch with Julius. Julius, on the other hand, states that she is down for the lunch meeting, but she struggles with the right place to pick. Yabuki, on the other hand, assumes that Julius is going on a date with Ayato, and then goes on to suggest a perfect spot. In the end, Julius agrees with the place he picks, and the call ends. About 2 hours later, Julius, Flora, and Ayato enjoy lunch at a restaurant. At some point, Ayato reminds Flora that she previously insisted on speaking to him. Flora pulls out her jotter but gets distracted by a girl being offered a jumbo parfait. Julius notices this and orders a jumbo parfait for Flora to eat. While Flora digs in, Ayato compliments Ayato for being nice to little children. Julius then replies by saying that kids like Flora do not get the chance to get spoiled frequently. At some point, Flora lets Julius have a spoon from her parfait. After that, Flora offers the same spoon to Ayato, and Julius is left shocked. While Ayato eats the parfait, Julius's cheeks turn pink despite trying to hide her feelings. She then insists that Flora get on with the reason she asked Ayato. Afterward, Flora opens a page in the jotter and asks Ayato about his relationship with Julius. Upon hearing this, Julius feels uncomfortable and takes the jotter away from Flora. Despite the fact that Flora insists on asking the questions, Julius refuses to return the jotter. Soon after, Corona arrives at the scene and politely asks Ayato to come with her. After she introduces herself as Le Wolf's council secretary, Julius realizes that Dirk sent her. In the meantime, Ayato clarifies things by saying that he asked to see Dirk. After hearing this, Julius insists on joining Ayato for the meeting. A call comes in from Dirk and he accepts Julius's offer to join the meeting. Minutes later, they all leave Flora behind at the restaurant as Corona leads the way to Dirk's car. As time goes on, Julius lashes out at Dirk for sending Irene to eliminate him from the tournament earlier. However, Ayato quietly calls her out to calm her nerves. At the start of Ayato's conversation with Dirk, he reveals that he states that he can be of help to him. Dirk, after hearing this, realizes that Ayato knows how he rolls. He then continues the conversation and listens to what Ayato wants to ask of him. Ayato goes straight to the point by asking about his sister, Haruko. Dirk replies by saying that he saw her only once at the eclipse. According to Julius, the eclipse was created by people unsatisfied with the fetas. It is usually more deadly due to the fact that contestants fight to the death in some cases. Dirk then goes on by explaining that she saw Haruka, but she was a contestant of the eclipse at that time. Back then, she wielded the Serveresta, but she lost to her last opponent. In the present, Dirk narrates that Haruka survived the fight, but he has no idea what happened after the match. He then goes on to question Ayato about his relationship with Madiath Mesa. Based on Ayato's facial expressions, Dirk realizes that he has no info on the said individual. He then gives the order for his driver to stop the car so that his guests can leave. Before Julius steps out, she questions Dirk about how he knew that Ayato was at the restaurant. As expected, Dirk declines to answer the question, and he drives away. In the meantime, Julius notices that Ayato is not himself. On the other hand, Corona speaks about Flora. the girl she saw at the restaurant earlier. When Dirk realizes that Flora is related to Julius, he tells Corona to provide more information about her. Sometime in the past, when Ayato was quite young, he trained with his sister in a sword fight. Back then, Saya watched them from a tree and met Ayato after his training session. They both had a conversation where Ayato asked for help in defeating his sister, Haruka. In the present, Ayato thinks about this moment but gets distracted during his training session with Julius. Later that day, while Ayato washes his face, he thinks about what Dirk said concerning his sister. However, he snaps back into reality when Julius arrives and calls him out. Julius does not take long to figure out that Ayato was previously thinking about his missing sister. When she voices out on the issue, she asks Ayato if he is scared about why Haruka vanished without saying a word. While she speaks, Ayato remains silent as he tries to pinpoint what he is truly scared of. At sunset, Saya pays Ayato a surprise visit in the weirdest way possible. After Ayato sits, Saya questions him about what's bothering him. Before Ayato can speak, she questions Ayato if he thinks that Haruka abandoned him. Since Ayato remains silent, Sei grabs his cheek and assures him that Haruka will never abandon him. She brings up an instance by saying that Haruka might not be able to reach out in her condition. As time goes on, Saya manages to console Ayato and brighten his spirits. Sometime in the past, Ayato teamed up with Saya to fight Haruka on a field. Back then, Ayato charged ferociously at his sister while Saya provided rear support. While the battle went down, Haruka acknowledged that Ayato's skill had improved. Since she was outnumbered, she went all out on her opponents and used a unique skill to end the battle. While Ayato sat frustrated on the ground, he questioned Haruka about the skills she used against him. Haruka replied by calling it the Amagiri Shinmei-ryu hidden technique, aka banish evil spirits. In the end, Saya and Ayato never managed to defeat the legendary Haruka, not even once. Saya and Ayato reflect on the past, and after that, Saya walks away. Before she leaves, she tells Ayato to rely on others when he is in trouble. In the meantime, Julius watches Ayato from a distance and walks away when she sees that he looks better. The following day, Ayato and Julius strategize on how they will take on their next opponents. Julius intends to exploit the fact that the twins go after their opponent's weak spot to her advantage. Moving on, the commentators announce the beginning of the quarterfinals to the audience. The next match is between Ayato's side and the twins, Shenyun and Shenhua. Before the battle begins, the twins begin to trash talk Ayato and Julius, as if it is all part of their strategy. However, Ayato remains calm and assures them that he does not plan to lose. His confidence amazes the twins, and they look forward to fighting against them. At the start of their battle, Ayato deploys the Servaresta and unseals his powers temporarily. He charges at Shenhua and leaves Shenyun for Julius. While at it, Shenyun uses her powers to deploy a smokescreen that covers the battle arena. As Ayato struggles to see in the smoke, he realizes that it might be fake, whereas the audience is complaining that they cannot see. After the smoke clears out, Shenyun makes multiple clones of himself and uses them to attack Ayato. Ayato makes the mistake of attacking a clone, and he pays a huge price for it. Julius, on the other hand, tries to support him in battle, but Shenhua appears and slams an explosive tile into her face. Meanwhile, Ayato recovers quickly and catches Julius in his arms before she can fall to the ground. Another round of battle begins as Julius recovers and shoots flaming attacks at Shenyun. Ayato joins in from behind, but he gets repelled by a wall erected by Shenyun. A tag explodes in his face and sends him falling to the ground. As he struggles to stand, Shenyun tells him to be careful of the invisible tags that Shenhua placed around the battle arena. Moving on, Julius falls under the influence of Shenhua's magic as she gets electrocuted. However, she recovers and tells Ayato not to worry about her. This alone makes Ayato assume the offense as he charges at Shenyun one more time. While at it, he wipes off a few other clones produced by Shenyun. When it gets down to 2 clones, he reaches his limits and falls to the ground. Julius, after seeing this, lets her guard down and falls victim to a punch to the chest. As Ayato falls weak to the ground, Shenyun approaches him to mock him. Just then, Ayato takes up his other Lux and slices off Shenyun's badge. The crowd cheers loudly at the turnout events, but Ayato's happiness is short-lived because it was a clone he attacked. When the real Shenyun reveals himself, Ayato realizes that he has been fighting clones since the smokescreen wore off. Shenyun shows no mercy as he surrounds Ayato with hundreds of explosive tiles. Even at that, Ayato tries to barge his way past the tile, but multiple explosions knock him to the ground. Before things can get worse, Julius grabs his hand and flies away from that position. When she reaches the other side of the arena, she rains some words of encouragement on Ayato. This alone makes Ayato recall a time in the past when he was fighting against his sister. He then recovers and asks a favor of Julius. Ayato tells Julius to buy him some time, adding that he intends to try something out. Julius agrees but warns that she will not be able to hold out their opponents for long. While Julius charges at the twins, Ayato assumes a meditative stance and shuts his eyes. Shenhua goes on with her invisibility trick. but Julius deploys wild flames that burn most of her hidden tiles. Despite the wildfire, Shenyun deploys magical tiles and aims them at Ayato, but Julius destroys them. Following that, Shenyun shoots elusive tiles at Julius, but she does not fall for it this time since they are fake. The last tile that comes at Julius catches her off guard, and as a result, she gets knocked to the ground. Meanwhile, Ayato is currently searching through the depths of his memories, trying to learn the Banish Evil Spirits technique. Ayato stayed back after his battle against Haruka to listen to the secret techniques she used to defeat him and Saya. Back then, Haruka explained the importance of observing things from more than one angle. In the present, Julius recovers and resumes her battle against the twins. She manages to pull off a move that makes her opponents assume the defensive. This alone makes Shenhua apologize to her brother for messing up their battle plan. Conversely, Julius makes the mistake of stepping on a magic tile hidden behind her. She gets restrained by a bunch of tiles to the extent that she cannot move. While in that position, Shenyun fires a bunch of explosive cards at her, and even the crowd is left speechless. Meanwhile, Ayato reaches out for a key in his mind and uses it to unlock the seal circling around him. In reality, Shenyun enjoys his time humiliating Jukas with her magic tiles. When he tries to land the finishing attack, Ayato regains consciousness and stops him with the Servaresta, leaving him shocked. Ayato then frees Julius from the magical tiles and apologizes for taking too long. When asked about his powers, he replies by saying that he only managed to reach the second level. He also reveals that he can last over 1 hour if he fights at full power. Moving on, the twins prepare for the next round of battle as Ayato assumes the offense. This time, Ayato uses the hidden technique Banish Evil Spirits to ascertain where the invisible tags are placed. While he walks closer to his opponents, he slices off the tags at super speed, leaving the Shenyun shocked. Even when Shenyun surrounds Ayato with explosive tiles, Ayato comes out like nothing happened. Shenhua, who is invisible at the time, struggles to land a sneak attack on Ayato and slams her to an explosive tile. Before she falls to the ground, Ayato slices off her badge, eliminating her in the process. Enraged, Shenyun deploys all his explosive magic tiles and forms them into a sphere. He then duplicates them and aims them at Julius. Before the magic spheres can reach their target, Ayato speeds over to Julius's position and destroys an electric-type magic tile. Shenyun laughs like a madman because he feels that he has Ayato and Julius on checkmate. To his surprise, Ayato tells him that there will be no need to dodge the magic tiles. He summons a great deal of magical energy and fuses it with the Servaresta to sluice the magic spheres to bits. Following that, Ayato leaves his weapon behind and charges at Shenyun with a dead look in his eye. This time, he shows no mercy as he lands a knockout punch on Shenyun. Ayato's side takes victory in the match, since Shenyun is now unconscious. Fan Xinglu, who watches the battle from her temple, smiles at Ayato because he performed well against his opponents. Moments after the battle, Flora meets Ayao and Jukels and compliments them for their victory. Claudia, who is present at the time, congratulates them for reaching the semi-finals. She is happy that Seiduken Academy has been able to score more points than she expected. However, she intends to express her gratitude to Ayato personally as well. After she voices out, she tells Ayato to join her in her room at nighttime. As she walks away from the scene, Julius holds Ayato back, claiming that she needs to discuss their battle strategy for their match coming up the following day. Meanwhile, Flora finds herself trying to make sense of what is going on in the room. The following day, at the managerial office, Mesa receives a report about the ongoing Phoenix Festa. According to his source, it has surpassed last year in terms of attendance. Also, it appears that Mesa is quite familiar with Ayato, but he knows him as Haruka's sister. He looks forward to the results of the semi-finals of the tournament, which is starting very soon. Later that morning, Kirin and Saya sit in the waiting room, awaiting the time that they will be called for their match. Here, Saya thanks Kirin for being her teammate because she made it so far in the tournament because of her. Meanwhile, Kirin appreciates Saya for partnering with her because her wish of saving her father will soon come true. However, Saya goes on to tell a tale about her father. According to her, he lost most of his body in an accident at work, but his brain stayed intact. Currently, he is hooked up to a nerve center in the workshop in his house. At this point, while listening to the story, Kirin feels bad for Saya. However, Saya tells her to cheer up because her father is happy with his current state, because he is free to research what he wants, which is making guns for her daughter. Saya then goes on to acknowledge that Camilla was kind of right in the past about her father's weapons. She testifies that no one except her can use her dad's weapons because they were created for her alone. However, she will not forgive anyone who rejects her father's ideas. Moving on, while Saya and Kirin approach the battle arena, they bump into Camilla and Ernesta on the way. Here, Camilla admits that Saya's weapons are unrivaled, but she still considers them unstable and not suitable for combat. This alone pisses Saya off, but this time, Kirin keeps her in check. In the meantime, Camilla promises to take back what she said only if Saya comes out victorious in the next match. As time goes on, Saya and Kirin appear before their opponents in the battle arena. Here, Artie gives them the 1-minute head start and the crowd cheers wildly. At the start of the match, Kieran is directly facing Artie. Artie warns that Saya is best to fight him if she wishes to breach his defensive shield. Meanwhile, Kieran pays no attention to him as she clashes her sword on some parts of her shield. After the first couple of slashes, Kieran figures out some stuff about Artie's basic architecture. The next time she charges at Artie, she lands a strike that causes her opponent to take a step backward. Shocked, Artie states that it is impossible for his shield to be breached. Meanwhile, Kieran is hell-bent on fighting against him fair and square. The next time she attacks, Artie blocks because he knows fully well that his opponent means business. However, the crowd cheers wildly because the 1-minute head start is not yet over. Meanwhile, Rimsey calls Saya out on the fact that she did not launch an attack during the 1-minute head start. Saya then replies by saying that she only wishes to fight when her opponent is going all out. After Rimsey lands the first strike, Saya jumps into mid-air and deploys her Lux. Her Lux is of the puppet type but human-controlled. While in mid-air, she uses the heavy cannons on her Lux to land a deadly strike on Rimus. As the smoke clears out, Saya tells her that she is ready to go all out. Meanwhile, Flora joins the crowd to cheer at Saya's insane performance. While at it, a shadow lurks around and abducts her from behind. The kidnapper drives Flora, who is unconscious at the time, away from the battle arena. In the meantime, Rimsey recovers and promises to go all out on Saya too. She moves at super speed trying to dodge Saya's attacks, but falls victim to a plasmic projection from Saya's Lux. The explosion in the battle arena raises the eyebrows of many as they stare in shock. After the smoke clears out, Saya sees that Rimsey took no major damage because of her shield. Rimsey, on the other hand, prepares a beam blast for Saya from a rage cannon. Since she claims that her cannon is superior, Saya intends to compare both devices to find out whose is best. However, when the projections from both cannons meet, it cancels out, and Rimsey is left shocked. On the other side of the battle arena, Kieran goes berserk on Artie while showing off her swordsmanship skills. She uses her speed to force Artie to go full-on defense. Kieran is in full weapon mode as Artie struggles to keep up with her. However, she finds out that Artie is reading her movements and then decides not to use the skill on him more than once. At some point, Artie assumes the offense, but Kieran still manages to get a clean slice of his armor. After Kieran assumes her stance, Artie gives an unknown signal to his partner. Meanwhile, Saya, on the other hand, assumes the defense as she dodges Rimsey's attacks. Nonetheless, Saya's cannons need to cool off because she can use them again. While she evades Rimsey's plasmic projections, she assumes an offensive stance and joins both her cannons into one. Rimsey ends her attacks because she wants to compare cannons with Saya again. However, the last thing that Rimsey hears is boom, before taking damage from Saya's cannon. When the smoke clears out, Saya notices that Rimsey is glitching a bit, but she is still online. Saya meets her after some time and apologizes for not being able to stop Artie. Along the line, Rimsey deploys her armor so it can combine with Artie. After the process is complete, Saya admits that Artie looks cool. However, Artie is now more powerful than ever as Kieran reveals that his skills have upgraded. Saya tells Kieran to buy her some time so she can get more information on Artie's armor and its defects. Kieran agrees but gets knocked to the ground in the first minute of her clash with Artie. Saya then heads over to her position to protect her from an imminent attack from Artie. This time, Saya manages to neutralize her enemy's attack by a thin margin. Now, her Lux overheats because of the amount of energy it expended while delivering the last plasmic blast. For this reason, Saya takes it offline and deploys a sniper-type Lux. At this point, even Artie expresses his respect for Saya and Kieran because he thinks of them as formidable opponents. However, he charges up to land a nasty attack on them. As time goes on, Ayato and Julius charge into a room and see Saya and Kieran sitting covered in bandages. Although Julius compliments them for doing well, Saya is unhappy with her performance. Claudia enters the room shortly to pay her respects to Saya and Kieran on behalf of the Seidukan Academy. Meanwhile, Julius notices that Flora is taking too long to return from the battle arena. Conversely, while Camilla walks in an alley with Ernesta, she receives a call from Dirk, who intends to speak to Ernesta. Dirk proposes that Ernest and Camilla join forces with him, but Ernesta does not like the idea. Despite that, Dirk assures her that she will change her mind when she sees a package he sent for her. Moving on, Julius receives a call from Flora's terminal and finds out that Flora has been abducted. The kidnapper intends for Ayato to file for an emergency seal on the Serveresta to guarantee Flora's safety. After the call ends, Ayato questions Claudia about the term emergency seal. Claudia responds by saying that an emergency seal is used to forcefully seal a wielder's Lux. On the contrary, the seal can be disabled on a Lux, but its wielder will never be able to use it again. This info leaves Saya and the other girls shocked. Despite that, Ayato intends to go on with the emergency seal to save Flora's life. Meanwhile, Saya does not like the idea, and as such she proposes that she will rescue Flora with Kieran's help. Claudia analyzes the situation, and then comes up with a plan. According to her, Ayato will apply for an emergency seal as the kidnapper demanded, while she will use her connections at the academy to delay the process. She advises Ayato to hide the Serveresta and use a different Lux until Flora is confirmed safe. She also reveals that Dirk is the one behind Flora's abduction, since the kidnapper's targets are Ayato and the Serveresta. Later that day, Saya and Kirin head to a redevelopment area on another side of the island to look for Flora. Meanwhile, Flora is currently held in a dark building by Zack of the Grimalkin group, a pack of assassins. The following day, Saya and Kirin experience difficulties searching for Flora around the development area. It appears that they have a long way to go if they intend to cover the site and find Flora. However, Kirin experiences pain in her leg as she tries to walk, but she puts up a facade that she is fine. Later that morning, Ayato and Julius appear before their next opponents at the battle arena. This time, they are up against Elliot Forrester and Doroteo Lemus from the Gerardworth Academy. Before the match begins, Ayato tells Julius to focus and have faith in Saya and Kirin. Following that, Ayato deploys a basic Lux and allows Julius to take on Lemus. The battle begins as Ayato temporarily breaks off his seal and activates his magical powers, while Julius lands a flaming attack on Lemus. Despite the wildfire, Lemus comes out undamaged, but with regenerative armor. After the flames clear out, Lemus deploys a horse and charges at Julius with his Lux. Ayato, on the other hand, gets distracted by Julius's battle against Lemus. He snaps out of it when Elliot calls him out to fight. Before their battle begins, Elliot questions Ayato about the Serveresta, and he replies by saying that something came up on his end, and he cannot use it at the moment. Their battle begins as Elliot attempts a speed strike on Ayato. It is basically a sword fight for Ayato, because of the type of weapon Elliot is using. Even so, Elliot goes all out on Ayato by launching several speed attacks on him, but he fails to deal any damage to his opponent. At some point, Ayato sees through him and takes advantage of his light sword. He ends their battle by landing a speed strike on Elliot's badge, leaving the crowd in shock. Meanwhile, Julius is still up against Lemus, who possesses a regenerative armor that sets him on the advantage. Despite that, Julius deploys progressive walls of fire, but Lemus storms through them to land the finishing strike. Within split seconds, Julius lands a direct flaming attack on Lemus while dodging an attack on her badge. In the end, Lemus falls weak to the ground, and the commentators struggle to analyze what just happened. Based on their observation, Lemus's armor was able to protect him against Julius's flames, but not the heat. As Lemus's armor wears off, he gasps for air and begs Julius to end the battle quickly. Julius wastes no time in slicing off Lemus's badge, and she joins Ayato in victory. Later at sunset, Ayato calls Saya to find out how things are going with the search. Saya replies accordingly by saying that she does not have any useful clues yet. However, Ayato informs her that he will join them soon since he is done with his battle. The fact that he is on to the finals pleased Saya and Kirin, but after the call, Saya fears that the next match will be tough. As Kirin leads the way to continue the search, she turns around and notices that Saya is frustrated. Her frustration stems from the fact that she has little time to find Flora before the final match starts. In the end, she snaps out of it and joins Kirin to find Flora. Back at the Saidukan Academy, Yabuki meets up with Julius and Ayato to congratulate them on their victory. Sadly, he finds out that Flora is still missing. He then offers to help find Flora, but warns Julius not to count on him too much. As Ayato charges out of the room with Julius, he stops and reveals that he wants to check something out. Later that evening, he disguises himself as a regular civilian and meets with Irene at a private restaurant. Here, he questions Irene if she has any leads on Flora's potential whereabouts, but she replies by saying no. She then tells Ayato that Dirk knows he would want to contact her, but then adds that she can predict where Flora might be. After some careful analysis, Irene predicts that Flora might be held up around the Rotlicht district. When asked why Rotlicht, she replies by saying that legal and illegal shops are clustered together, and it is hard to barge into such places. Elsewhere, at the Alicante Academy, Camilla stares at Ernesta's puppets with an angry look on her face. Ernesta tries to cheer her up by saying that Artie would have lost if he had not used the combined skill with Rimsey. She then speaks about the reason she is involved in the tournament, which is to create autonomous puppets with human emotions, so they can have the same rights as humans one day. Afterward, Camilla tells a tale about the time she first met Ernesta. Back then, her parents' workplace was attacked by terrorists, and the guards were eliminated right away. Although Camilla's parents tried to fight back, regular civilians could not hold a battle against armed men. As a result, Camilla fell victim to an explosion, and she suffered a great loss. After the incident, Camilla regained consciousness. At that time, Ernesta was working on her body as half of it was replaced with machine parts. From that day, Camilla swore to give half of her life to Ernesta. In the present, Camilla dislikes the fact that Ernesta included the combined skill in her puppets. In Ernesta's defense, her goal is to win the tournament by any means. While she tries to explain herself to Camilla, Artie interrupts her and requests that she leave the scar on his face. He feels that the scar is a sign that he has gained combat experience and growth. Rimsey, on the other hand, tells Ernesta to adjust the range in which Artie combines with her armor. Now, Ernesta is pleased with the way her puppets have evolved. Elsewhere, Ayato arrives at the Rotlick district in search of Flora. While wandering the streets, he gains the attention of some thugs, but he runs away. While at it, a strange lady, Sylvia, offers to lend a helping hand to lead him away from the thugs. Ayato takes Sylvia up on her offer since he has no choice. While he joins her to run away from the scene, he realizes that she might be a Strega just like Julius. Soon, they both arrive at the top of a construction site, and Ayato is now clear away from the thugs. Ayato thanks Sylvia for the help, and then goes on to listen to a piece of advice about security around the district. Sylvia explains that mafia activities have been increasing around the district since there is an ongoing festa. At some point, Sylvia calls Ayato by his real name, and this leaves him shocked. Reason being that he is in disguise and he does not expect someone to recognize him. Sylvia, on the other hand, tells him that the disguise is not good enough. She then tells him that she helped earlier because he seemed like a good person. While she speaks, a thug lurks out of the shadows with the intent of taking Ayato out. Ayato remains unfazed, despite his life being in danger. When the thug turns around and sees that Sylvia is sitting behind him, he diverts his attention from Ayato and focuses on her. Ayato tries to convince the thug not to go after Sylvia, but he refuses. Ayato speeds off from his position and deflects the first dagger that the thug aims at Sylvia. However, when the thug tries to stab Sylvia the second time, he misses his target. At some point, she gets bored in battle and lands the final strike, leaving Ayato shocked. Ayato snaps back into reality when Sylvia asks him if he is looking for someone. As Ayato replies saying yes, Sylvia tells him that she can help. She leads the way to another location to avoid getting interrupted by unknown thugs. Here, Sylvia kind of figures out Ayato's personality and advises him to rely on others when he needs help. She then asks for a clear description of the missing person, and Ayato provides the details. Before Sylvia begins to do her thing, she tells Ayato not to reveal anything about her encounter with her to anyone. As Ayato agrees, she activates her magic and begins looking for Flora. While she activates her magic, Ayato expresses shock because he now knows her true identity as Sylvia Lineheim, Queen Vale Girls Academy's rank 1. Sylvia uses the song she sings to send waves around the district to search for Flora's approximate location. Early at dawn, Sylvia successfully narrows down Flora's location to the northern district outside Rotlicht. Ayato sincerely thanks Sylvia for her help, and then goes on to ask for her contact information. Sylvia freaks out when she hears this because it has been a while since a guy hit on her. However, Ayato clarifies his intentions by saying that he wants to thank her properly later. Sylvia smiles at him and then hands him her home address. Moments after she leaves the scene, Ayato contacts Julius over the phone and informs her that he knows where Flora is. When asked how he got the info, he replies to Julius by saying that he cannot say. Saya and Kirin, who are also on the call, tell Julius and Ayato not to join them on the rescue mission. Saya insists because Julius and Ayato have the final match of the tournament to worry about. On the other hand, Kirin assures Julius that she will bring Flora back to her, while Saya tells Ayato to avenge her in the final. Meanwhile, the kidnapper, Werner, gets on a call with his boss, Dirk, to give a status report about Flora. Dirk has reason to believe that someone will come after Flora sooner or later. He then tells Werner to use Flora as leverage when the time comes. Before the call ends, Werner detects the presence of foreign factors and informs his boss accordingly. Elsewhere, Yabuki, Saya, and Kirin arrive at a tall building to search for Flora. At the entrance, Yabuki hacks past the security systems of the building and opens the front door, leaving Saya and Kirin utterly shocked. Minutes after they charge inside the building, they find a shadow lurking around. Kirin, upon seeing it, places her hands on her sword ready to go for the kill. Immediately, the shadow attacks her. It dies instantly. Soon, more shadows come out from the ground in hundreds to attack Saya and the others. Yabuki tries his best to avoid getting killed while Saya and Kirin assume the offense. At some point, Saya deploys a cannon-type Lux and uses it to wipe out all the shadows in a single shot. However, another army of shadows appears before her, but Lester arrives at the scene before things can get nasty. He uses his Lux to wipe out a wave of shadows, but then complains about being dragged into a fight that does not concern him. It turns out that Yabuki forced him to come, because he has some dirt on him. Nevertheless, Saya and the others take advantage of Lester's presence as they run out of that room to another level of the building. Now Lester is stuck with a temper and an army of shadows that does not concern him. Meanwhile, Ayato and Julius prepare for their final match, which is coming up very soon. While on the way to the battle arena, Julius tells Ayato that she feels good having him as a friend and partner. She appreciates the fact that she got to make good friends like Saya and Kirin. She then assures Ayato that all will be well concerning Flora's case. After they charge into the battle arena, Julius tells Ayato to give his all in the match. Artie interrupts Julius's conversation with Ayato and states that he looks forward to the match. However, Ayato promises him that he will win the match. Ayato seems glad that he is facing autonomous puppets in the final match because he is free to go all out on them. When he deploys a normal Lux to fight, one of the commentators states that he will not be using the Servaresta, adding that he applied for an emergency seal not too long ago. The battle begins as Ayato and Julius charge ferociously at Artie, neglecting Rimsey completely. Artie reads the first attack Ayato tries to land on his, and moves accordingly to block it. Julius then provides rear support by shooting a bunch of flaming fireballs at Artie. Rimus gets pissed at some point and reveals that she is in the match. However, Ayato assures her that he will keep an eye on her. The previous day, Ayato trained with Julius to prepare for the final battle. Back then, Ayato questioned Julius about what they would do about Rimsey while attacking Artie. Julius replied by saying that Ayato would make use of his secret technique, banish evil spirits, to read what would happen in the whole arena. In the present, Ayato predicts Rimsey's move and moves Julius away from her attack. While Rimsey fires more shots, Ayato uses his hidden technique to move Julius away from getting shot. At some point, they both assume the offensive wand attacks Artie, while still taking fire from Rimsey. Julius plants her usual position type, but Artie takes little damage despite falling victim to it. Because of that, Ayato regroups with Julius to enact their next battle strategy. While at it, Artie commends Ayato and Julius for their impressive battle strategy. He feels more excited to fight them because he gets to learn more. However, he acknowledges that he will have to unveil his secret technique since Ayato and Julius have clearly surpassed him and his partner. RMCI, on the other hand, agrees with Artie and reveals that she will merge with him. Julius, after hearing this, reminds Rimsey that her fusion takes a long time to prepare. Rimsey replies by saying that her master prepared for such cases. She then deploys a cannon and fires an explosive shot in the atmosphere that rains down plasmic shots from its core, preventing Ayato and Julius from getting to her. While her opponents are distracted, she lets go of her armor and allows it to merge with Artie. Ayato charges at Rimsey despite the raining fireworks and manages to slice off her badge when she reaches the ground. However, he is too late because the fusion with Artie is already complete. Back at Saya's position, Kieran finds Flora restrained to a wall and tries to save her. While at it, Werner comes out of the ground and attempts a sneak attack on Kieran. However, Kieran is quick enough to dodge but with some pain in her leg. After she recovers, she analyzes Werner's powers and figures out the best moves that she can use against him. When she gets attacked again, she stands her ground and repels all of Werner's moves. Sadly, Werner uses Flora as leverage and makes Kieran lower her weapon. Before things can get worse, Saya arrives and shoots an explosive shot from her sniper-type Lux. She then shoots a bullet that produces lots of light, allowing Kieran to free Flora. While Kieran runs away with Flora, she gets attacked by Werner again. This time, she hands Flora over to Saya so she can engage the enemy. During the battle against Werner, Kieran uses her speed to block all of Werner's moves. When she realizes that her opponent is quite strong, she focuses on defense and pays a huge price for it, and then warns Saya not to make any move. Despite her condition, Kieran dares Werner and stands in front of him facing him with her sword. She then assumes a battle stance that sends chills down Werner's spine. At the appointed time, Kieran lands her final attack on him, leaving him defenseless. Saya, on the other hand, deploys her cannon-type Lux and uses it to blast Werner to a wall. Back at the battle arena, Ayato and Julius realize that Artie is much more powerful than before. Artie then boasts about his powers and appreciates his master, Ernesta, for giving them to him. It gets to a point where Artie boxes his opponent to a tight corner and shoots his hammer again at them. However, Julius uses everything she has to block the hammer, but it takes a great deal of vitality from her. While she recovers, Claudia charges into the commentator's room and informs Julius and Ayato that Flora is safe. Dirk is left shocked by the news while Ayato and Julius are somewhat excited. They intend to switch things up for Artie in the next round of battle. To show that he means business, Ayato takes out the Servaresta and deploys it ready to fight. Even Camilla is intimidated because Ayato now wields his preferred weapon. During the third round of battle, Ayato lands several speed attacks on Artie using the Servaresta. Julius also attacks from the rear by summoning a flaming attack at Artie. Surprisingly, Artie withstands attacks from Julius and Ayato at the same time to the extent that they consume him. This time, he goes into what humans call a shock, and Camilla is left worried. Camilla tells Ernesta to stop Artie from going overload, but Ernesta refuses, giving an excuse that there is nothing she can do. Afterward, Ayato and Julius realize that Artie is ranging out of control just like Irene did in the past. Ayato intends to end things quickly before he runs out. However, Artie demonstrates that he has total control over the power overload, and Jukas is left shocked. The fourth round of battle begins as Artie charges ferociously at Ayato to land an attack on him. While at it, he falls victim to Julie's position-type trap, but comes out with no scratch. However, he returns the favor by shooting a concentrated fireball at Julius that destroys most of the battle arena. Now, Julius falls weak to the ground because she took most of the damage. While on her knees, she reaches out to the serveresta and tells Ayato to alter it to a form that suits him best. Since Ayato is not quite experienced in such a craft, she helps him focus his imagination on a single figure. In the end, Ayato successfully alters the shape of the serveresta by reducing its size. In the meantime, Julius rests on the ground because she is drained. The fifth round of battle begins as both contestants walk slowly towards themselves. Artie lands the first strike, but Ayato deflects it, but this time with ease. Ayato counters Artie's attacks in a way that leaves several rocks flying in the air. Within split seconds, Ayato speeds up instantly to Artie's back to land a nasty speed attack on him. When his luck swings past Artie's armor, Dirk, the commentators, and everyone else watching the match seize their noise in suspense of what just happened. Finally, Ayato falls to his knees while Artie's badge falls to the ground. As Ayato's side is declared the winner of the Phoenix Festa, the crowd cheers wildly while Artie laughs at himself for being trashed in such a manner. Moments later, Ayato and Julius appear before Madiath Mesa to receive their medals. Meanwhile, Kieran watches all that goes down from her hospital bed. Finally, Mesa hands Ayato an award plaque, and the crowd cheers wildly. Surprisingly, Ayato sees Sylvia standing beside Dirk amongst the student council presidents. Elsewhere, Yabuki finds Werner trying to sneak away from the sewer. He recognizes that Werner is part of the Grimalkin, but what is more shocking is the fact that he knows Werner's name. As Yabuki draws closer to Werner, he gets impaled by multiple spikes shot by Werner. In the meantime, Saya and Claudia congratulate Ayato for winning the tournament. It is at this point that Ayato finds out that Lester helped to rescue Flora. However, Lester tells Ayato that he does not have to thank him because Yabuki blackmailed him into doing the heavy lifting. After hearing this, Ayato wonders where Yabuki might be. When he voices out, Lester states that Yabuki ditched him while he was helping to save Flora. Back at sewers, Yabuki kills Werner by stabbing him in the back. It turns out that he used a transformation spell to deceive Werner that he was dead. Moving on, Saya apologizes to Ayato for not being able to catch the kidnapper. Before Lester walks away from the scene, he congratulates Ayato on winning the tournament. In his absence, Saya turns around and sees Rimus and Camilla. Rimsey reveals that she wants to rematch Saya, and Camilla explains why. According to Camilla, she cannot acknowledge the previous fight as a fair win. Saya, after hearing this, smiles and takes Camilla up on her offer. Later that evening, Ernesta hops on a call with Dirk, where she gets asked to join forces. At first, she declines Dirk's offer, but then contemplates based on the fact that Dirk has access to the core she needs for her next puppet. After the call ends, she gives off a weird smile, and it seems as though she has another hideous plan. Elsewhere, Julius and the others check up on Kieran, who lies in the hospital. When Flora arrives, she feels too shy to enter the room. She feels bad that she caused trouble for Ayato and the others, but when she voices out, Ayato assures her that everything is fine. In the end, she cries uncontrollably while hugging Julius. As time passes, Ayato and Julius get alone in a room within the Seidukan Academy. Here, Julius thanks Ayato for contributing to her success in the tournament because her wish has come true. She then assures Ayato that their victory is the first of many more to come. In the end, they both have a toast to celebrate their partnership together. The following day, Ayato and Jukas arrive at Mesa's office to listen to a report about Flora's kidnapper. Mesa reveals that his unit has not been able to find evidence to link Werner to any specific academy. However, he assures them that the investigation will continue and advises that they remain patient. He also assures Ayato that he will try his best to find his missing sister and return her to him. After Ayato and Julius leave the office, Mesa hops on a call with Dirk, and it turns out that they are working together. Toward the end of the call, Dirk questions Mesa if he will not tell Ayato about his relationship with Haruka. Mesa responds by saying that he does not intend to do so. After the call, Mesa pulls up his laptop and it shows Haruka lying unconscious in a stasis-type capsule. Weeks after the Phoenix tournament, Julius meets up with Saya, Ayato, and the others to discover their winter vacation plans. Kieran, Claudia, and some others seem to have their hands full, but despite that, Julius wants to discuss something with them that concerns the winter vacation. The following day, Ayato finds himself on a flight with Julius, Saya, and the others, heading to the kingdom of Lizeltania. After they reach the airport, Flora arrives in a Rolls-Royce to escort Julius and her guests to the castle. While on the way to the palace, the residents chant in favor of Julius and Ayato since they won the previous festa together. Later that morning, Julius barges into her brother's chambers, pissed about the fact that the residents arranged a parade for her and Ayato. Her brother, who is also the king, lies on his wife's lap while getting his ear done. King Jolbert introduces himself and his wife to Julius's friends and then explains his reason for staging the parade. According to him, the residents are fascinated by Julius and her partner, Ayato. Claudia, on the other hand, thinks that there is more to what King Jolbert just said. When she voices out, Jolbert affirms the fact, and that reveals that he wants to speak to Julius and Ayato in private. After the meeting with the king, Flora shows Julius, Saya, and the others to their rooms. On the way, Julius explains the history of her country to Ayato. Sometime in the past, the garden and villa just in front of the palace were originally built by the Holy Roman Empire. Back then, it gained independence and became the Kingdom of Lusitania, but the German Revolution demolished it. After Invertia occurred, a meteor was found within the former Lusitania borders, and it was an extremely rare first-class Beltis meteor. Then, the Integrated Enterprise Foundation began fighting over it. Because a military confrontation would have been risky back then, the members of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation agreed to share profits. They also created a playground for themselves by resurrecting the country that existed around the meteor before Inversia occurred. Julius reveals that her country is a puppet state controlled by the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. The country gets financial support from its controllers, but lots of people are suffering. In the end, she expresses a strong will to change the fate of her country. Later that evening, Flora informs Ayato that Saya is missing. After hearing this, Ayato smiles and then goes off to find Saya. Minutes later, he finds her standing at the top of a roof. When he reaches her, she apologizes to him for some reason. When Ayato asks why, she takes him down history lane and reminds him of the time she moved away from her home. It turns out that she ceased communication with Ayato because it was too painful to hear his voice over the phone and to play with him. Now in the present, she feels that things would have been different when Haruka went missing. According to her, she would have helped to cheer Ayato up when he was down and alone. Now, Saya swears to be there for Ayato whenever the need arises. After she says this, Ayato smiles and appreciates her for her words. During dinner, Cloudeye addresses Julius, Saya, Kirin, and Ayato about her intention of taking part in the Grips Festa. She wants them to be her teammates, and Ayato is already a confirmed member. When the offer gets to Julius, she questions Claudia about why she is so obsessed with the Grips. Claudia explains that she will not be able to win another Festa on her own, but she stands a chance at the Grips Festa if her teammates are reliable. In the end, Julius agrees to become a member of Claudia's team, and Claudia is left glad. That following evening, Ayato prepares to attend a banquet organized by the king. Although he dresses in a suit and looks like a gentleman, he does not feel comfortable in his outfit. Before leaving his room, he hands the Cerberus to Flora since he cannot enter the party with weapons. He then arrives at the ladies' room and meets Julius and the other ladies beautifully dressed. Although Claudia would like to have Ayato all to himself for the night, she concedes to Julius and lets her have her way. While Ayato holds hands with Julius in a couple style, Kirin and Saya are left somewhat jealous. While the part is underway, Julius offers Ayato some champagne to calm his nerves down since he looks nervous. Ayato is not used to a crowd of people in a room, let alone elites. To while time away, Julius explains the role her brother plays in the country. According to her, Jolbert does not speak out politically, and he is a puppet of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. All the women around him are his lovers sent by the Integrated Enterprise Foundation, just like Maria. However, Julius has reason to believe that they are spies, except Maria, who has a genuine airhead. She then speaks about Claudia, and reveals that her father is in charge of Lusitania. When asked about his position, Julius replies by saying that Claudia's dad is his wife's personal subordinate. He then adds that he has no chance of going higher in rank because he is too human. The only way to go higher in the Integrate Enterprise Foundation is to completely lose your humanity. After Julius is done talking, she heads off to meet her brother while Ayato goes out to get some fresh air. On his way out, he rescues Kirin from a group of men who see her as attractive. After that, Kirin explains that she has issues speaking to people who are not her friends or parents. However, she also does not feel confident in her dress, but Ayato assures her that she looks pretty. Kirin likes the compliment, but she wants Ayato to hold her like he did Julius in the dressing room. After she voices out, Saya arrives too and demands to be held. While both girls struggle for a spot with Ayato, an old man, Gustave Malraux arrives at the scene and calls Ayato's attention. Gustave commends Ayato for winning the previous Festa, but then advises him not to join Claudia's team for the next one. Upon hearing this, Kirin and Saya assume the offense ready to fight when the need arises. When Ayato asks Gustave what would happen if he refused his offer, Gustave responds by summoning a chimera-type demon. The demon crashes the party inside the palace and sends the king's guests running for their lives. Saya, on the other hand, uses a cannon-type Lux to shoot a large phantom blast at the demon. After the demon falls to the ground, Julius and Claudia arrive at the scene. It is at this point that Ayato activates his powers and assumes the offensive against the demon. Without using any weapon, Ayato lands fatal attacks on the demon and deals a great deal of damage to it. He even holds the demon in place for Saya and Julius to blast it to bits. Gustave, who stands on the water some miles away from the palace, seems impressed by Ayato's skills. However, he intends to rain down more surprises for Ayato in the future. The following day, King Jolbert reveals info about Gustave to Julius, Claudia, and the others. According to him, Gustave is an internationally wanted criminal. Claudia also adds that Gustave took part in a large terror crisis in Asterisk, known as Jade Twilight. When asked if he was a terrorist, Claudia reveals that Guatave participated purely for financial reasons. Kieran, on the other hand, has reason to believe that Gustave is carrying out someone's request because yesterday's actions were not political. Jolbert, after hearing this, offers to put Ayato and the others under protective custody, but they respectfully decline the offer. Before the meeting ends, King Jolbert tells Ayato and Julius to stay back in his chambers. Later that morning, the king asks Ayato if would like to marry Julius. This alone leaves Ayato shocked, but Julius is quite pissed too. King Jolbert reminds Julius that she would end up like him and be married off by the Integrated Enterprise Foundation for their own convenience. Julius is quite upset because she knows that Jolbert is telling the truth. She then realizes why Jolbert initiated the parade when she arrived from the airport with Ayato. When she asks Jolbert why the marriage arrangement is sudden, he replies that she recently won the Phoenix Festa, and she is more valuable now to the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. However, Jolbert questions Ayato if he would like to stay back in Lee Sultania and be with Julius, but he declines the offer and states that he will not allow himself to be the shackles that bind Julius. Towards the end of the conversation, Jolbert tells Julius not to compete in the Grips Festa, reason being that her popularity will render him irrelevant and he will become useless. Despite revealing this to Julius, she declines the offer and walks away from the king's chambers angrily. In her absence, Jolbert explains the disadvantages of Julius being on the throne. Long story short, she will suffer at the hands of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation because she wants to change the situation of her country. He then questions Ayato if he can help change Julius's mind, but he replies by saying no. After hearing this, Jolbert leans back on his couch and reveals that he will be a bigger puppet than he is. He then reveals Julius's potential location and advises Ayato to go off to see her. Moments later, Ayato sprints to the orphanage and sees Julius playing with some kids. Here, the kids run off to meet Ayato because he is now popular. Julius, on the other hand, is quite shocked that Ayato was able to find her in no time. A nun, Sister Therese, leads the way into the orphanage and offers Ayato some warm tea. While Ayato sits with Julius, some other junior nuns enter the room excited to see Julius. After spending a good amount of time with Julius, Sister Therese sends the nuns back to their working positions. In their absence, Sister Therese appreciates Ayato for helping to save Flora in the past. She then adds that some of the kids are Genestella, and she trains them in self-defense. At some point, the conversation in the room becomes centered around a greenhouse situated behind them. Sister Therese explains that the greenhouse used to be the favorite spot of one of the girls who lived in the orphanage. While Sister Therese narrates the story of the said girl, Julius stands up and leaves the room giving an excuse that she wants to get some air. Ayato runs after her and joins her in the slums of the city. On the way, Ayato tells Julius that Jolbert is worried about her. Julius responds by saying that she knows, but she cannot accept her country's situation. Sometime in the past, some men dressed in black took a little girl away from the orphanage. Back then, Julius watched but was unable to do anything. Days later, she visited the greenhouse worried sick about the girl. In the present, Julius bluntly states that she intends to free her country from bondage by winning the next festa. However, she sees a girl in a car that moves past her and immediately recognizes her. After the car moves away, she struggles to make herself believe that she saw someone in the car. Ayato ends up chasing after her as she moves to another location. After arriving at the girl's position, Ayato notices that even the ground is corroded. Julius tries to reach out to the girl by calling her name. It is at this point that Ayato realizes that the girl is Orphelia. While he drowns in shock, Julius tries to talk Orphelia into coming back to her. Orphelia declines the offer and warns Julius to leave, but she declines. As a result, Julius prepares to fight Orphelia, but then warns Ayato not to interfere. A battle begins as Julius lands fire attacks on Orphelia. To Ayato's surprise, the attack deals no damage to Orphelia despite being in base form. At first, Ophelia activates her magic to attack Julius, but she powers down because she feels that fighting Julius is pointless. Julius ends up forcing her hand after landing one of her most powerful magical attacks. In the end, Julius gets punched unconscious, but Ayato catches her before reaching the ground. He ends up going up against Orphelia, but he struggles to block her attacks. While holding Julius in his arms, he loses vitality as he breathes toxic gases secreted by Ophrelia's magical presence. Before his body can give up on him, Gustave arrives and requests that Orphelia leave Ayato to him. At the same time, Dirk Eberwein calls Orphelia and orders her to head back to the laboratory. In her absence, Gustave summons two chimeras and unleashes them to finish Ayato off. Ayato stands at a great disadvantage since he still holds Julius in his arms. He manages to kill the first chimera, but is left exposed to the attack of the next one. Before he can get torn to pieces, Claudia arrives and saves him by killing the other monster. Claudia uses her diplomatic skills to send Gustave away to avoid an unnecessary battle. In the end, Ayato falls weak to the ground and passes out. Ayato regains consciousness about 3 days later and finds himself lying in bed with Saya and Kirin. Julius arrives in the room and looks happy that Ayato is finally awake. Ayato expresses shock when he finds out from Julius that he has been out for 3 days. Julius also adds that Kirin and Saya were worried about him and that they watched after him while he was asleep. She also thanks Ayato for saving her from Gustav and Ophelia as well. At this point, Ayato tells Julius to tell the truth behind Ophelia. In the first minute of their conversation, Ayat realizes that Ophelia is the girl Sister Therese was talking about earlier. Sometime in the past, when Ophelia was little, she was quite into flowers and nature. In the present, Julius narrates that the place she passed out earlier used to be an integrated enterprise foundation laboratory called Frauenlab. An Alicante student known as Magnum Opus used to do research there which involved mass-producing Genistella. Ayato is left utterly shocked after he hears this. Julius goes on to explain that Ophelia was the guinea pig used in one of Magnum's experiments and she was taken as collateral for the orphanage's debt. As a result, Ophelia, who was not born a Genistella, is not the most powerful stega in the world. However, she pays the price of not being able to touch the flowers she once loved. Still, in the past, Julius saw Ophelia in Asterisk and tried to persuade her to come back to her. Back then, a nasty battle occurred, and Julius was beaten to the ground. In the present, Julius apologizes to Ayato for dragging him into her mess, and then goes on to say that she wants to finish it on her own. Saya and Kirin are forced to open their eyes because Julius knows that they are listening to her conversation. In the meantime, Ayato questions Julius if there has been any other attack in the city. Julius responds by saying no, adding that she has raised the security level in the city and the orphanage too. Soon, Flora arrives in the room and reveals that the city is under attack. After listening to Flora, Julius finds out that the policemen assigned to the orphanage are now engaging foreign beings flying around the city. This alone enrages Julius as she knows that Gustav is using the orange to lure her and Ayato out. At first, she tries to leave the room to settle things herself, but Ayato reminds her about the importance of relying on others. In the end, she agrees with Ayato's idea and comes up with a plan to take Gustav down. Later that evening, Julius flies Ayato off to Gustav's position. Minutes after reaching there, Gustav uses his magical powers to summon a gigantic hydra from the sea. A single blast from the hydra clears a pathway in the city, leaving Ayato and Julius utterly shocked. After that, Gustav disappears from the scene while Ayato convinces Julius to help evacuate the citizens. Before Julius leaves, she tells Ayato not to do anything crazy before she gets back. In her absence, Ayato charges at the Hydra and tries his best to prevent the vile creature from getting into the city. While at it, he slices off a head of Hydra, but another one grows back in its place. It is at this point that Ayato realizes that the legends about Hydras are true. While he fights against the Hydra, Saya fires a sniper shot from a distance, saving him from being burned to death. She then establishes a communication link with Ayato and guides him through his attack phase. Ayato intends to single out the main head of the Hydra and cut it off so he can defeat it at once. While he charges at the Hydra again, Saya provides rear support and covers his 6. The battle goes on to the extent that Ayato succeeds in cutting 5 out of the Hydra's 6 heads. When he goes in for the final kill, the Hydra speeds up its regeneration by focusing its vitality on one head. Even at that, Ayato moves quickly to prevent himself from being blown to bits. He uses his size as an advantage to account for speed and flexibility while fighting against the monster. It gets to a point where Julius arrives and joins the party, assisting Ayato to restrain the Hydra. Ayato wastes no time slicing the Hydra in halves using an elongated form of his Cervaresta. After the Hydra's passing, Gustav, who stands miles away from the sea, acknowledges that he is at a great loss. He then turns around only to find Kirin gradually approaching his position. Out of sheer curiosity, he questions Kirin about how she was able to find where he is. In turn, Kirin replies by saying that she followed Julius's logic. Before Gustav is done activating his magical powers to fight, Kirin accelerates instantly to his back and renders him unconscious. While he lies unconscious, the creatures flying around the city begin to wither away. At nightfall, Claudia meets up with her father and informs him that Gustave Malraux has been caught. After hearing this, Claudia's dad, Mr. Enfield, reveals that he is the one who hired Gustave. He knows very well that his wife will not hesitate to take him out if she finds out that he is involved. He begs his daughter Claudia not to compete in the Grips Festa, but she declines the offer. Mr. Enfield goes as far as begging his daughter on his knees, but she declines his offer. Moreover, she thanks him for all that he has done for her in the past, but then walks away from him, insisting on participating in the festa. The following day, King Jolbert addresses Ayato and his friends, and thanks them for all they have done for his kingdom. At some point, Julius summons the courage to tell him that she is going to win the Grips Festa, and give the royal family more power in Lidl Tanya. She then begs her brother for his help, and he finally agrees. This time, he makes a promise to stop being a puppet to the Integrated Enterprise Foundation if Julius wins the Grips Festa. Julius, after hearing this, thanks Jolbert for the support, while Ayato and Kirin smile at them. Just then, Ayato receives a call from the chairman Mesa. While on the call, Mesa informs him that he has found Haruka. Immediately after Ayato lands an asterisk, he heads over to meet Mesa so he can see his sister, Haruka. Sadly, he finds his sister lying unconscious in a stasis-type capsule. Mesa claims that the doctors cannot do anything to restore Haruka to her normal self. After hearing this, Ayato reveals that Haruka might have put a binding spell on herself, but he has no idea why she would do it in the first place. At sunset, he sits sadly outside a building thinking about his sister's condition. Along the line, a girl from the Alicante Academy introduces herself to Ayato as Jane Rowlands, and then reveals that she can save Haruka. While she says this, she laughs uncontrollably, and then reveals that she is also called Magnum Opus. The following day, Claudia apologizes to Julia, Ayato, and the others for her dad's actions in Lisultania. When asked why her dad was involved in the previous attack, Claudia replies by saying that her win in the Grips Festa will cause problems for Ginga. She has reason to believe that Mr. Enfield probably wanted to settle things before Ginga made a serious move. At this point, Julius reminds Claudia that she might be making herself an enemy of Ginga by going on with her plans. Even at that, Julius and the others still intend to be part of Claudia's team so they can win the Grips Festa.